They said she'd beg. They said she'd break. They were wrong. When Elena Ward walked into that Manhattan courtroom with her twin toddlers, everyone expected a massacre. Her massacre. The billionaire husband, the prenup from hell, the mistress already picking out curtains for the penthouse. But what happened in the next 2 hours didn't just destroy a marriage. It detonated an empire, exposed a conspiracy, and turned a discarded wife into the most dangerous woman in the room. Stay with me until the very end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The courtroom smelled like expensive cologne and cheap justice. Elena Ward stood in the hallway outside courtroom 7B, her fingers trembling as she gripped the small hands of her 3-year-old twins, Maya and Lucas. The marble floors of the Manhattan family court gleamed under fluorescent lights, polished to a shine that reflected the faces of people who belonged there. Lawyers in $1,000 suits, executives with their assistants, the kind of people who navigated these halls like sharks in familiar waters. Elena didn't belong there. At least that's what everyone thought. Her dress was 5 years old, purchased from a department store clearance rack back when she still believed her husband loved her. The hem had been mended twice. Her shoes were scuffed. Her hair, once professionally styled every week, now hung in a simple ponytail. No makeup. No jewelry except for the wedding ring she still wore out of spite or habit. She wasn't sure which anymore. Maya tugged at her hand. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." "Soon, baby," Elena whispered, crouching down to meet her daughter's eyes. "Just a little while longer, okay? Can you be brave for Mommy?" Lucas, always the quieter twin, pressed against her leg. His small face was serious, too serious for a 3-year-old. He'd stopped smiling 3 months ago, right around the time Victor moved out. Children knew. They always knew when the world was crumbling. "Mrs. Ward?" A young paralegal appeared at her elbow, clipboard in hand, eyes filled with poorly disguised pity. "They're ready for you. You can bring the children into the gallery, but they'll need to stay quiet. Judge Rothstein doesn't tolerate disruptions." Elena nodded, straightening up. Her knees cracked. She was 32 years old and felt ancient. The courtroom doors swung open, and the first thing she saw was Victor. He sat at the plaintiff's table like a king on a throne, his posture relaxed, one arm draped casually over the back of his chair. Victor Hale. 41 years old. 6'2" of controlled ambition wrapped in a Tom Ford suit. His dark hair was graying at the temples in that distinguished way that made him look like a Wall Street prophet. He'd made the cover of Forbes twice in the past year. The algorithm king, they called him. The man who'd revolutionized predictive analytics and made $2 billion before his 40th birthday. Her husband, the father of her children, the man who'd asked for a divorce via his attorney while she was still nursing the twins. Next to him sat Brianna Cross. Of course she was there. Where else would she be? Brianna was 26, blonde, and dressed in a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. She was Victor's chief marketing officer, a title that apparently included weekend trips to Cabo, late-night strategy sessions at the Mandarin Oriental, and Instagram photos that Victor's PR team kept trying to scrub from the internet. Brianna saw Elena first. Her perfectly glossed lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned over and whispered something to Victor. He turned, and for just a moment, Elena saw his expression. Not guilt, not remorse, just a flicker of impatience, as if she were a problem he'd already delegated to subordinates and was annoyed to still be dealing with personally. That look hurt worse than any of the fights. Worse than finding the hotel receipts. Worse than the night he'd told her he needed space to find himself. Elena led the twins to the gallery benches, settling them on either side of her. A few spectators turned to stare. A woman in the back row, with a press badge. A couple of law students with notebooks. An older man who looked vaguely familiar, but Elena couldn't place. "All rise." Everyone stood as Judge Marion Rothstein entered. She was in her early 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that had seen every flavor of human failure and disappointment. She'd been a family court judge for 23 years. Nothing surprised her anymore. "Be seated," Judge Rothstein said, settling into her chair and surveying the room over her reading glasses. Her gaze lingered on Elena and the twins for a moment, something unreadable crossing her features, before moving to the lawyers. Victor's attorney, Marcus Chen, rose immediately. Chen was a partner at Whitmore and Associates, the kind of firm that didn't take cases. They took scalps. His reputation was legendary. In 12 years of practicing family law, he'd never lost a prenuptial enforcement case. Never. Your Honor, Chen began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. This should be a straightforward matter. My client, Mr. Victor Hale, and the respondent, Mrs. Elena Ward, entered into a prenuptial agreement 7 years ago, prior to their marriage. That agreement clearly stipulates the division of assets in the event of divorce. Mrs. Ward was represented by independent counsel at the time of signing. She received a settlement offer of $200,000, which she has refused. We're here today to enforce the prenuptial agreement as written and to establish a custody arrangement for the minor children. He said it so casually. $200,000 for 7 years of marriage, for raising his children while he built his empire, for the night she'd stayed up editing his presentations while pregnant, for moving across the country away from her family because his company needed to be in New York, for becoming so small and so quiet that she'd almost forgotten what her own voice sounded like. Judge Rothstein looked down at the papers before her. Mrs. Ward, do you have legal representation? Elena started to stand, but her legs felt weak. She gripped the bench in front of her. I'm representing myself, Your Honor. A ripple of reaction moved through the courtroom. Someone in the back actually laughed, quickly stifled, but Elena heard it. Chen's expression didn't change, but she saw the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth. Brianna leaned back in her seat, openly smiling now. Victor turned to look at her fully for the first time. His dark eyes were flat, emotionless. This was the face he wore in board meetings, she realized, the face he showed competitors before he destroyed them. She just never expected to be on the receiving end of it. Mrs. Ward, Judge Rothstein said, her tone gentler now, I'm going to be frank with you. Representing yourself in a case involving a prenuptial agreement and custody issues is inadvisable. Are you sure you don't want to request a continuance to secure counsel? I'm sure, Your Honor. Elena's voice came out stronger than she felt. I'd like to proceed. Judge Rothstein studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. Mr. Chen, you may present your case. What followed was a masterclass in legal evisceration. Chen moved through his argument like a surgeon, each point precise and cutting. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Elena's own attorney had confirmed it at the time. She'd entered the marriage with no assets of her own. Everything, the penthouse, the cars, the vacation homes, the investment portfolio worth over $2 billion, all of it belonged to Victor's company, Hale Analytics, the company he'd founded, the company he'd built. Mrs. Ward was a graduate student when she met my client, Chen explained, pacing in front of the judge's bench. She had student loan debt of approximately $87,000, which Mr. Hale graciously paid off during their engagement. She contributed no capital to the founding or operation of Hale Analytics. She held no position in the company. While we acknowledge her role as a homemaker and mother, the prenuptial agreement specifically addresses this contribution with the settlement offer of $200,000, more than generous given the circumstances. More than generous. Elena's nails dug into her palms. Furthermore, Chen continued, regarding custody of the minor children, we believe a shared arrangement is inappropriate given Mrs. Ward's current circumstances. She has no income, no employment history for the past 7 years, and no permanent residence. She's currently staying in a studio apartment in Queens provided by Mr. Hale's charity. My client, in contrast, can provide the children with stability, educational opportunities, and that's not true. Everyone turned. It took Elena a moment to realize the voice had been hers. Judge Rothstein raised her eyebrows. Mrs. Ward, you'll have an opportunity to respond. Please wait your turn. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but he's lying. That apartment isn't charity. I'm paying rent with the allowance Victor's been giving me, and I do have employment history. I worked. Mrs. Ward, the judge's voice cracked like a whip. You will wait your turn. Do you understand? Elena sat down, her face burning. Maya started to cry softly. Lucas wrapped his arms around her leg. Chen continued as if nothing had happened. As I was saying, Your Honor, Mr. Hale is prepared to offer Mrs. Ward supervised visitation every other weekend, with the possibility of increased access pending a psychological evaluation. He's also willing to maintain the $200,000 settlement offer and to pay Mrs. Ward's rent for an additional 6 months to allow her time to secure employment. He made it sound so reasonable, so fair. Victor had taken everything, her marriage, her self-respect, her identity, and now his lawyer was wrapping it in legal language and calling it generosity. Chen returned to his seat. Brianna placed her hand on Victor's arm, a gesture of support that was really just another way of marking territory. Mine. Judge Rothstein shuffled her papers. Mrs. Ward, you may respond to Mr. Chen's arguments. Elena stood. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them behind her back. Your Honor, I don't accept the characterization Mr. Chen has presented. Her voice sounded thin and reedy in the cavernous courtroom. She cleared her throat and tried again. 7 years ago, I did sign a prenuptial agreement. That's true, but circumstances have changed since then, and I believe there are provisions in our agreement that Mr. Chen has overlooked. Chen's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been surprise, or maybe just annoyance at having his time wasted. Your Honor, he interjected smoothly, I've reviewed this prenuptial agreement dozens of times. There are no provisions that would change the fundamental asset division. If Mrs. Ward believes otherwise, I'd be happy to review the specific language she's referencing. Elena reached into the worn canvas bag at her feet, the same bag she used for groceries, for the twins' toys, for everything. Her fingers found the envelope. It was sealed with red wax, old-fashioned and formal. She'd kept it hidden for 7 years, exactly as instructed. Your Honor, she said, walking forward, I'd like to submit evidence. It's related to the prenuptial agreement, but it's a separate document. Judge Rothstein gestured for the bailiff to retrieve the envelope. The courtroom had gone very quiet. Victor leaned forward in his seat for the first time, a small crease appearing between his eyebrows. The judge broke the seal and pulled out several pages of dense legal text, along with what appeared to be corporate filings and patent documents. Her expression remained neutral as she read, but her fingers moved more slowly with each page. Mrs. Ward, she said, finally looking up, can you explain what I'm looking at here? Elena took a breath. This was it. 7 years of silence, of making herself small, of pretending to be less than she was. It all came down to this moment. Your Honor, that document establishes a trust created in 2014, approximately 2 years before Victor and I married. The trust holds intellectual property rights to the core algorithm that became the foundation of Hale Analytics. The courtroom erupted. Chen shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is absurd. Mrs. Ward is clearly attempting to introduce fraudulent documentation to... Mr. Chen, Judge Rothstein's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Sit down. I'll determine what's fraudulent and what isn't. She turned back to Elena, her eyes sharp now, fully engaged. Continue, Mrs. Ward. The algorithm in question, Elena said, her voice growing stronger, is called the Adaptive Predictive Network Model, or APNM. It's the basis for every product Hale Analytics has ever sold. The patent was filed in October 2014 under the name of a trust called the Minerva Technology Trust. I am the sole beneficiary of that trust. This is ridiculous, Brianna's voice rang out from the plaintiff's table. Victor created that algorithm. Everyone knows that. It's his... Ms. Cross, Judge Rothstein's gaze swiveled to her. You are not a party to this proceeding. One more outburst and you'll be removed from my courtroom. Brianna's mouth snapped shut, but her face had gone blotchy with rage. Victor hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. But Elena knew him well enough to recognize the signs, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers had curled into a loose fist. He was furious. Good. Chen had recovered his composure. Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess to review these documents. I've never seen them before, and I find it highly suspicious that they're only being introduced now, on the day of the hearing. The prenuptial agreement, Elena interrupted, has a clause, Section 14, subsection C. It states that any assets acquired during the marriage through the use of intellectual property owned by either party prior to the marriage shall be subject to equitable distribution regardless of the terms outlined in sections 1 through 13. She'd memorized the language 7 years ago, had read it so many times the words were burned into her brain. Judge Rothstein flipped through the prenuptial agreement, her finger tracing down the page. Her eyebrows rose. "I'll be damned," she muttered, then looked at Chen. "Mr. Chen, were you aware of this clause?" Chen's face had lost some of its color. "Your Honor, that clause it's a standard boilerplate provision. It only applies if there were pre-existing intellectual property assets, which there weren't." Mr. Hale created the APNM algorithm in 2015 after his engagement to Mrs. Ward. "No," Elena said quietly. "He didn't." She pulled out another document from her bag, this one a printout of an academic paper. "This is a research paper I published in the Journal of Computational Mathematics in September 2014, titled Adaptive Learning Models in Nonlinear Predictive Systems. It describes the foundational theory behind the APNM algorithm. I was a PhD candidate at MIT at the time." She set the paper on the judge's bench, then pulled out more documents, a cascade of evidence she'd been gathering for 7 years, hidden away, waiting for this moment. "These are email exchanges between myself and Victor from October through December 2014, discussing the practical applications of my research. These are my original notes and code samples, time-stamped and notarized. This is the original patent filing, which lists the Minerva Trust as the owner. And this," she set down a final document, "is the trust agreement itself, established by my advisor at MIT, Professor Richard Caldwell, with me as the sole beneficiary." The courtroom had gone completely silent. Even the law students had stopped taking notes. Judge Rothstein was reading through the documents with laser focus now, cross-referencing dates, checking signatures, examining the patent filings against the prenuptial agreement. Victor finally spoke, his voice tight and controlled. "Elena, what the hell are you doing?" It was the first thing he'd said directly to her in months. Not in the custody negotiations, not in the settlement offers, not in any of the endless emails from his lawyers. And now, with his empire potentially crumbling around him, now he remembered her name. Elena turned to look at him. "I'm correcting the record, Victor. You didn't create the algorithm that made you a billionaire. I did. You implemented it brilliantly. I'll give you that. Your business acumen, your ability to scale, your vision for the company, those are all yours. But the core technology, the thing that makes Hale Analytics different from every other predictive analytics firm, that's mine." "You're insane," Brianna hissed. "Victor is a genius. Everyone knows the story Victor told them," Elena said, her voice calm now, almost serene. She'd spent years being afraid of this moment, and now that it was here, she felt nothing but clarity. The brilliant entrepreneur who dropped out of business school to found a tech company, the visionary who saw the future of data analytics. It's a good story, a very good story, but it's not the whole truth. Chen was flipping through the documents frantically, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Your Honor, I need time to verify these claims. This is highly irregular." "What's irregular, Mr. Chen?" Judge Rothstein said, her voice like ice, "is that you apparently failed to conduct adequate discovery. These documents, if authentic, represent a significant oversight on your part." "They're authentic," came a new voice from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. The older man Elena had noticed earlier was standing. He was in his 70s, distinguished, wearing a tweed jacket that screamed academic rather than corporate. He walked forward with the slow, measured pace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in lecture halls. "Professor Caldwell?" Elena's voice wavered. She hadn't seen her old advisor in over 5 years. "Miss Ward," he nodded to her, then addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I'm Dr. Richard Caldwell, Professor Emeritus of Applied Mathematics at MIT. I was Elena Ward's doctoral advisor from 2012 to 2015. I can verify that every document she's presented regarding her research and the Minerva Trust is genuine. I created the trust myself at Elena's request, specifically to protect her intellectual property." Judge Rothstein leaned forward. Professor, why would a doctoral student need such a trust? Because she was brilliant, Your Honor, and she knew it. The APNM algorithm was revolutionary. I told her at the time that it was worth millions, potentially billions, if properly commercialized. But Elena wanted to finish her doctorate, and she was engaged to be married to a man who was very ambitious and very shrewd. I advised her to protect her work legally before sharing it with anyone, including her fiancé. The professor's gaze shifted to Victor, and there was something cold in those old eyes. She didn't listen to all my advice, unfortunately. I told her not to marry him. Victor stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. This is a setup. She's been planning this. Sit down, Mr. Hale, Judge Rothstein commanded. Now. Victor sat, but his face had gone red. The judge looked at Elena. Mrs. Ward, if you've owned this intellectual property since 2014, why are we only hearing about it now? Why allow your husband to build a company around your work without asserting your rights? This was the question Elena had known was coming. The answer was simple and humiliating. Because I loved him, Your Honor. Because he told me we were partners. Because he said what was his was mine and what was mine was his. Because when I showed him my research and he got excited about the commercial possibilities, I was happy to share it with him. I gave him permission to use the algorithm. I helped him refine it for business applications. I believed we were building something together. Her voice cracked slightly, and she paused to collect herself. Maya was crying openly now, sensing her mother's distress. Lucas had his thumb in his mouth, something he only did when he was terrified. I didn't care about the patents or the money back then, Elena continued. I just wanted to finish my degree and start our life together. Victor promised that once the company was stable, we'd formalize everything. Make me a partner. Put my name on the patents. But that never happened. There was always a reason to wait. Tax implications, investor concerns, timing. And then I got pregnant, and I was sick all the time, and Victor said I should focus on the babies while he handled the business. By the time the twins were born, I dropped out of the PhD program. I had postpartum depression. I could barely get out of bed some days, and Victor was traveling constantly, building his empire. She looked directly at her husband. An empire built on my work. You gave permission, Victor exploded, apparently unable to contain himself any longer. You wanted me to use it. You can't just change your mind now because you're pissed about the divorce. Actually, Mr. Hale, Judge Rothstein said, flipping through the trust documents, according to these papers, Mrs. Ward's permission was limited. The trust agreement specifically states that any commercial use of the APNM algorithm requires annual renewal of licensing rights. And according to this, the licensing agreement expired 2 years ago. The color drained from Victor's face. Which means, the judge continued, her voice taking on a sharp edge, that Hale Analytics has been using proprietary technology without a valid license for 24 months. That's intellectual property theft, Mr. Hale. That's a federal crime. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Chen was on his feet, talking rapidly about technicalities and good faith use. Brianna was grabbing Victor's arm, her perfect composure finally cracking. The press badge woman was typing furiously on her phone. The law students were practically vibrating with excitement. This was the kind of courtroom drama that became case studies. And Elena stood in the center of it all, watching her carefully constructed revenge unfold exactly as she'd planned for 7 years. But she wasn't done yet. Your Honor, she said, loud enough to cut through the noise. There's more. The room fell silent again. Judge Rothstein looked at her with something that might have been respect. More? Elena pulled out another envelope, this one thinner. I'd like to submit evidence of financial fraud committed by Mr. Hale and his company. Chen actually stumbled. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of— I'll decide what's beyond scope, Mr. Chen, the judge snapped. Continue, Mrs. Ward. 3 months ago, Elena said, Victor filed for divorce. What he didn't know was that our prenuptial agreement has another clause. One Professor Caldwell insisted on including. Section 18 states that if either party files for divorce, while the couple has minor children under the age of 5, a full financial audit of all marital assets is automatically triggered to ensure proper child support calculations. She handed the envelope to the bailiff. I hired a forensic accountant. These are her findings. Judge Rothstein opened the envelope and began reading. Her expression grew darker with each page. According to this analysis, Elena continued, her voice steady now, completely in control, Hale Analytics has been systematically underreporting revenue for the past 3 years. Money has been funneled into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg. Tax fraud, money laundering, securities fraud. The accountant found evidence of all of it, and the timing is particularly interesting. She turned to face Victor fully. The largest transfers happened 6 months ago, right around the time you started your affair with Brianna. Brianna shot to her feet. I had nothing to do with any financial... Really? Elena pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward the judge. These are Instagram posts from Brianna's private account. Screenshots because she's deleted the originals. Here she is in Grand Cayman in February. Here's Victor, same location, same weekend, different photo. Here they are in Luxembourg in March. You can see them in the background of each other's photos. They were very careful not to post pictures together, but they weren't quite careful enough. She scrolled through more images. And here's my favorite. Brianna posting about her new Cartier bracelet in April. The exact same week that $500,000 moved from a Hale Analytics subsidiary to a Luxembourg bank account registered to a company called B Cross Consulting, which is owned by Brianna Cross. Brianna had gone white. She looked at Victor, panic clear in her eyes. Victor stood up slowly. His famous composure had completely shattered. Elena, you don't understand what you're... I understand perfectly, she said. You were preparing to run. You were going to divorce me, take whatever you could from the company, and disappear with your mistress to a country with no extradition treaty. The only reason you filed for divorce when you did was because you needed to do it before the twins turned 5, before that audit clause could be triggered. She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. But you miscalculated. You filed for divorce on September 15th. The twins' 5th birthday is September 14th. You were 1 day too late, Victor. 1 single day. The look on his face, pure, impotent rage mixed with the dawning realization of catastrophic failure, was worth every sleepless night, every humiliation, every moment she'd spent making herself small and quiet and forgettable. Judge Rothstein set down the financial documents. Mr. Chen, I'm ordering a 60-day continuance of this divorce proceeding. In the meantime, I'm issuing an emergency injunction freezing all assets associated with Hale Analytics pending a full investigation. I'm also referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. She looked at Victor with undisguised contempt. Mr. Hale, you should contact a criminal defense attorney soon. As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened. 2 people in FBI windbreakers walked in, followed by a man in a suit who looked like he'd been federal prosecutor in a past life. Special Agent Karen Mitchell, FBI, the woman announced. We have a warrant for the arrest of Victor James Hale on charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. Everything happened very fast after that. Victor was handcuffed, actually handcuffed, his $2,000 suit wrinkling as the agents pulled his arms behind his back. He was reading his Miranda rights in the middle of a Manhattan courtroom while dozens of people watched and recorded on their phones. Brianna tried to run. She actually bolted for the back door, her Louboutin clicking frantically on the marble floor, but a bailiff caught her before she made it 5 feet. Brianna Cross, the second FBI agent said, we have questions about your involvement in... I want a lawyer, Brianna screamed. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer. This is Victor's fault. I didn't know about any of it. Her words echoed through the courtroom, and Elena saw Victor's face twist with betrayal. Even now, even in the middle of his spectacular collapse, he'd apparently believed Brianna loved him for more than his money. Men really were stupid sometimes. The FBI agents led Victor toward the door. As he passed Elena, he stopped, forcing the agents to pause. You vindictive bitch, he hissed. You destroyed everything. Was it worth it to tear down what we built together? Elena picked up Lucas, settling him on her hip, and took Maya's hand. She met her soon-to-be ex-husband's eyes calmly. You destroyed it yourself, Victor. I just made sure you didn't take my children down with you. He opened his mouth to respond, but the agents pulled him away. The courtroom slowly emptied. Chen packed up his briefcase without a word, his legendary record shattered. Professor Caldwell approached Elena and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You did well, my dear," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I wasn't sure you would." "I've been waiting for this day for 7 years," he said. "I knew eventually you'd remember who you really are." He left, and Elena was alone with her children in the gradually emptying courtroom. Judge Rothstein was still at her bench, writing notes. She looked up and caught Elena's eye. "Mrs. Ward, a word?" Elena approached with the twins, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky and cold. "Yes, Your Honor?" The judge's expression softened slightly. "What you did today was risky. If those documents hadn't been genuine, if your story hadn't checked out, you would have lost everything, including possibly your children." "I know." "Why did you wait so long? You could have asserted your rights to that algorithm years ago." Elena looked down at her twins. Maya had finally stopped crying. Lucas's thumb was still in his mouth. "Because I hoped I was wrong about him," she said simply. "I hoped that the man I married was still in there somewhere, that he'd remember what we meant to each other, that he'd—" She trailed off, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter now." Judge Rothstein studied her for a long moment. "The prenuptial agreement is void given the circumstances. You're looking at a very different settlement now, probably a very large one." "But I don't want his money," Elena said. "I just want my children to be safe, and I want control of my own work." "You'll have both," the judge said. "I'll make sure of it." Elena nodded her thanks and turned to leave. "Mrs. Ward?" She looked back. "For what it's worth," Judge Rothstein said, "in 23 years on this bench, I've never seen anyone play a prenup clause quite like that. You'd have made a hell of a lawyer." Elena smiled, a real smile this time. "I was thinking about finishing that PhD, actually." She walked out of the courtroom into the marble hallway, which was packed with reporters now. Cameras flashed, questions were shouted. But Elena kept walking, holding her children close, until she made it to the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of herself in the polished metal. A woman in a faded dress with 2 children hanging onto her, looking tired and scared and triumphant all at once. The poor wife was gone. The victim was gone. What remained was something harder, something sharper, something that had learned to fight back. The elevator descended, carrying Elena Ward toward a future that was uncertain and terrifying and entirely, completely hers. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that this wasn't over, that there were still pieces on the board she hadn't accounted for. That victory this complete always came with a price. But for now, in this moment, she let herself feel it, the savage joy of watching the man who'd broken her heart get exactly what he deserved. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and Elena stepped out into the chaos of cameras and questions, ready for whatever came next. The media circus lasted exactly 4 days. Elena had never experienced anything like it. Reporters camped outside the studio apartment in Queens, their cameras ready every time she opened the door. Her phone, a cheap prepaid model she'd bought after Victor cut off her iPhone, rang constantly with numbers she didn't recognize. Entertainment blogs, financial news networks, women's magazines, true crime podcasts. Everyone wanted the exclusive story of how the discarded wife had destroyed a billionaire. She ignored all of them. What she couldn't ignore was the knock on her door at 11 o'clock on the 4th night, long after the twins had finally fallen asleep in the apartment's only bedroom while Elena made do with the pull-out couch. She looked through the peephole and saw a woman in an expensive charcoal suit, alone, holding a briefcase. Not a reporter. The posture was all wrong. This woman stood like someone who owned whatever space she occupied. "Mrs. Ward," the woman called through the door. "My name is Catherine Park. I'm the general counsel for Hale Analytics. I'm here to discuss terms." Elena's hand hovered over the deadbolt. Every instinct screamed not to open the door, not to engage, not without her own lawyer present. But she was also desperately curious about what Victor's company, her company, legally speaking, wanted badly enough to send someone at nearly midnight. She opened the door but left the chain on. "It's late. My children are sleeping." "I understand. This will only take a moment." Catherine Park was in her 50s, Asian American, with sharp eyes behind designer frames. "The board of directors has reviewed the situation. We'd like to propose a settlement that would be advantageous to all parties. I'm not interested in settlements. Not even one that gives you $100 million and full custody of your children with no visitation rights for Mr. Hale? Elena's breath caught. Through the crack in the door, she saw Catherine's slight smile. The woman knew she'd landed her hook. The board is in crisis mode, Catherine continued. Our stock price has dropped 42% since news of Victor's arrest broke. We have clients threatening to pull contracts worth billions. The company needs stability, and it needs distance from Victor Hale. You could provide both. How? Let me come in, and I'll explain. Against her better judgment, Elena unhooked the chain. Catherine entered with the economical movements of someone who'd learned not to waste energy on unnecessary gestures. She set her briefcase on the small dining table, really just a card table Elena had bought at a thrift store, and opened it. The board wants to offer you a deal, Catherine said, pulling out documents. You sign over all rights to the APNM algorithm and any derivatives to Hale Analytics in perpetuity. In exchange, you receive a one-time payment of $100 million, tax-free. The company publicly acknowledges your contribution to the core technology. You get full custody with no visitation. We drop all challenges to the divorce settlement. Victor gets no company stock, no severance, nothing. He's out completely. Elena scanned the papers, her mind racing. It was an enormous amount of money, life-changing. The twins would never want for anything. She could finish her degree, start over, disappear into a comfortable life where none of this had ever happened. What's the catch? Catherine's expression didn't change. You sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You never speak publicly about Victor, the company, or the algorithm's origins. You allow the company to continue operating without the cloud of intellectual property disputes. You go away quietly and let us rebuild. So Victor's crimes just disappear. Victor is the federal government's problem now, Catherine said. The company is ours. We're trying to save 8,000 jobs, Mrs. Ward. 8,000 people who did nothing wrong but work for a man who turned out to be a criminal. If this company collapses because of prolonged legal battles over IP ownership, all of those people lose their livelihoods. Is that what you want? It was a good argument, a compelling argument. Elena could almost convince herself it was the right thing to do. Almost. No, she said quietly. Catherine blinked. I'm sorry? I said no. I'm not signing over my algorithm. I'm not staying quiet. And I'm not letting you pretend Victor was the only problem. The lawyer's expression hardened. Mrs. Ward, I don't think you understand the position you're in. You have no income, no legal representation, no corporate experience. You're going up against a company with virtually unlimited resources. We can tie you up in litigation for years. By the time you see a dime from any settlement, your children will be in college. Then I guess I'd better get a good lawyer. Catherine stood, closing her briefcase with a sharp snap. You're making a mistake. The board is offering you a generous exit. If you refuse, they'll fight you with everything they have. They'll paint you as a vindictive ex-wife trying to extort the company. They'll question your mental health, your fitness as a mother, your claims to the algorithm. By the time they're done, you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation. I've already been painted as the poor, pathetic wife, Elena said, opening the door. At least now I'll be the poor, pathetic wife who owns the technology that runs your entire company. Tell your board I'll see them in court. Catherine paused at the threshold. You really think you can win this fight? I think I already won the one that mattered, Elena said. Everything else is just paperwork. The lawyer left without another word. Elena locked the door and leaned against it, her hands shaking. The adrenaline rush from the courtroom had sustained her for days, but it was wearing off now, leaving her acutely aware of how precarious her situation really was. Catherine Park was right about one thing. Elena needed a lawyer, a good one, the kind she absolutely could not afford. She was still leaning against the door when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, expecting another reporter, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Ward, this is Rebecca Choi from Sullivan and Cromwell. Professor Caldwell gave me your number. I'd like to discuss representation. Elena's breath caught. Sullivan and Cromwell was one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. I can't afford... Professor Caldwell has offered to cover my retainer, Rebecca interrupted. And if you'll permit me to be blunt, Mrs. Ward, this case is going to be a landmark decision on intellectual property rights and prenuptial agreements. It's the kind of case that makes careers. I'd be representing you even if you couldn't pay me a cent. They talked for an hour. Rebecca was young, early 30s, Elena guessed, but sharp as a scalpel. She'd already reviewed all the documents from the custody hearing and had a strategy mapped out. The company is panicking, Rebecca explained. They offered you a settlement because they know their position is weak. You own the core technology. The trust documents are airtight. They're going to argue that you granted implied licensing rights through your marriage, but that's a tough sell given the expired agreement. What we need to focus on is, I want the company, Elena said. Silence on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, what? I don't want a settlement. I want control of Hale Analytics, not majority control. I'm not greedy, but enough to have a real say in how it's run, enough to make sure it's run ethically, and I want Victor's name stripped from everything. Mrs. Ward, Elena, that's going to be a much harder fight. We're talking about potentially months or years of litigation. The board will never agree voluntarily, then we make them agree involuntarily, Elena said. The words came out with more confidence than she felt, but saying them made something crystallize inside her. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This wasn't just about making Victor pay. This was about reclaiming something he'd taken from her, not just her algorithm, but her agency, her identity, her right to exist as more than just someone's discarded wife. Okay, Rebecca said slowly. Okay. Let me think about how we approach this. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone from Hale Analytics without me present. Don't sign anything. I already told Catherine Park to go to hell. Rebecca laughed, surprised and genuine. Well, that's a start. Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow, we start building our war. Elena hung up and checked on the twins. They were both asleep. Maya snoring softly, Lucas curled around his stuffed dinosaur. They looked peaceful, innocent. They had no idea their lives had been detonated and reconstructed in the space of 4 days. She was smoothing Lucas's hair when her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She almost ignored it, but the area code was one she recognized. Manhattan, but not a cell phone. A landline. Hello? Elena. The voice was male, older, with the kind of cultivated accent that suggested old money and older privilege. We need to talk. In person. Tonight. Who is this? Your father. Elena's blood turned to ice. She hadn't spoken to her father in 7 years, hadn't seen him in 8. The last time they'd been in the same room, he'd told her that marrying Victor was the stupidest decision she'd ever made, and that he was washing his hands of her entirely. How did you get this number? I've always had ways to reach you, Elena. I chose not to use them, until now. I have nothing to say to you. Perhaps not, but I have a great deal to say to you. A car will arrive at your building in 20 minutes. I suggest you be downstairs. And if I'm not, then I'll come up, and we'll have this conversation in your sadly inadequate apartment in front of your sleeping children. Your choice. The line went dead. Elena stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, a sick feeling spreading through her stomach. Her father. After all these years of silence, he chose now to resurface. That couldn't be coincidence. She looked at the twins, then at her phone. She could ignore him, pretend she hadn't answered. But if she knew anything about Marcus Whitmore, it was that he didn't make threats he wasn't prepared to follow through on. And the last thing she wanted was him in this apartment, in this small space she'd tried to make safe for her children. She scribbled a quick note for the neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who'd been kind to her. Emergency. Please listen for the twins, back in an hour. And slipped it under her door. Then she grabbed her coat and went downstairs. The car was already there. Not a town car or a limo, too conspicuous, just a black Mercedes sedan with tinted windows. The back door opened as she approached. Her father hadn't changed much. Marcus Whitmore was 73 years old and looked like he'd been carved from granite. Silver hair, impeccably cut. A suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. He'd made his fortune in defense contracting and commercial real estate, and he'd spent the past 5 decades turning that fortune into power. Get in, he said. It wasn't a request. Elena got in. The door closed behind her with the solid thunk of German engineering. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly. "You look terrible," Marcus observed. "It's been a difficult week." "I imagine it has. You've caused quite a stir. Victor Hale arrested, his company in chaos, your face all over the financial news. Very dramatic. What do you want?" "I want to know what you think you're doing." Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. "What I think I'm doing? I'm protecting my children. I'm reclaiming what's mine. I thought you'd approve. You always said I needed to develop a spine." "There's a difference between having a spine and being suicidal," Marcus said. "You've attacked a multi-billion-dollar corporation, Elena. Do you have any idea the forces you've set in motion?" "I have some idea, yes. I did live with Victor for 7 years. Victor was a pawn." Marcus turned to look at her fully, and there was something in his eyes that made Elena's skin crawl. A useful pawn, admittedly, but still a pawn. The real players in this game aren't concerned with petty things like marriage or custody or even billions of dollars. They're concerned with power, control, and you've just threatened something they consider theirs. The algorithm, it's not theirs. It was never theirs. "Everything is theirs if they want it badly enough," Marcus said. "You should have taken the settlement offer." Elena stared at him. "How did you know about the settlement offer? Catherine Park came to my apartment 2 hours ago." "Because I told the board to make it," Marcus said calmly. "I've been on the board of Hale Analytics since 2017. Silent partner, 20% stake through a holding company. I've been watching Victor build his little empire on your work for years." The world tilted. Elena gripped the car door handle, suddenly nauseous. You knew? You knew he stole my algorithm?" "Of course I knew. I read your MIT papers. I knew exactly what you'd created and what it was worth. Why do you think I was so angry when you married him? You were supposed to commercialize that technology yourself, build your own company. Instead, you handed it to Victor like a lovesick fool and then let him convince you to become a housewife. But you cut me off. You said you were done with me." "I lied." Marcus's expression didn't change. "I maintained surveillance, made sure Victor didn't physically harm you, made sure the twins were cared for. I even paid off several reporters who were getting too close to the truth about the algorithm's origins. I was protecting my investment." "Your investment?" Elena's voice came out strangled. "I'm your daughter." "You're both," Marcus said. "And I've been waiting for 7 years to see which would prove more valuable, the daughter who gave up or the daughter who fought back. This week, you finally showed me." The car was moving through Manhattan now, heading uptown. Elena didn't recognize the route. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk without interruption. You have decisions to make, Elena, and very little time to make them. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. They're going to vote on how to proceed with you. I can influence that vote, but I need to know what you really want." "I already told Catherine, yes, you want control of the company. Very ambitious, but that's a goal, not a plan. How do you intend to achieve it? What are you willing to sacrifice? Because make no mistake, there will be sacrifices. Victor was useful to certain people. You've removed him from the board. Those people are not happy." "What people?" Marcus smiled, thin and cold. "The kind who don't appreciate their carefully constructed arrangements being disrupted by a woman in a thrift store dress making a scene in family court." The car pulled up in front of an unmarked building in Midtown. Marcus got out without waiting to see if Elena followed. She did, because what else could she do? The building was residential, but old money residential, the kind with a doorman who knew better than to ask questions and an elevator that required a key. They rode up in silence to the penthouse. The apartment was exactly what Elena expected. Expensive, cold, decorated by someone who valued investment over comfort. Marcus led her to a study lined with law books and first editions. He poured himself a scotch without offering her one. 7 years ago, he said, settling into a leather chair, you came to me with news of your engagement. Do you remember what I told you? You said Victor was ambitious and ruthless and that I was making a mistake. I also offered you an alternative, a position at one of my companies, a chance to develop your algorithm independently, full funding, full support, in exchange for a stake in whatever you built. You refused. Elena remembered. She'd been so angry, so certain that her father was just trying to control her life again the way he always had. Victor had seemed like freedom by comparison, someone who loved her for herself, not for what she could build or produce. What a stupid, naive girl she'd been. "I'm not offering you that deal again," Marcus continued. "That ship has sailed. What I'm offering now is something different. An alliance." "What kind of alliance?" "You want control of Hale Analytics. I can give it to you. I control 20% directly, and I have relationships with shareholders who control another 35%. That's 55%. Enough to do whatever we want with the company, but there are conditions." Of course there were. "What conditions?" Marcus set down his glass. "First, you stop being naive about how this works. You're not going to waltz into a boardroom and remake the company in your image through force of moral righteousness. Corporate power is about leverage and alliances and knowing which battles to fight. You need to learn that fast. What else? Second, you acknowledge that this company exists in a complex ecosystem. It has government contracts, intelligence community relationships, partnerships with entities that don't appear on any public documentation. You inherit those relationships when you take control. You honor them." Elena felt sick. "What kind of relationships?" "The kind that keep the company profitable and politically protected. The kind that ensure Hale Analytics remains a valuable asset to people who matter. You don't need to understand all the details, Elena. You just need to not interfere." "So you want me to be a puppet, just like Victor was?" "I want you to be smart," Marcus said. "Victor got greedy, started skimming, thought he was clever enough to hide it. That's why I allowed his arrest. He'd become a liability. But the company itself needs to continue. The work it does is too important to too many people. If you can't accept that, then take the 100 million and walk away. But if you want real power, if you want to actually control your creation rather than just profit from it, then you need to understand the price." Elena stood up, pacing to the window. Manhattan glittered below, millions of lights representing millions of people who had no idea what kind of deals were made in rooms like this. "What happened to Victor?" she asked quietly. "Really happened. You said he was a pawn." "Victor made the mistake of thinking he was a king," Marcus said. "He started making decisions without consulting the right people. The offshore accounts, the fraud. I knew about all of it. I could have shut it down at any time. But he'd also started talking to certain federal prosecutors about making deals, offering information about government contracts in exchange for immunity. That couldn't be allowed." "So you—" "What? Set him up?" "I ensured that the evidence of his crimes became available to the right people at the right time. Your little courtroom performance was well-timed, but not accidental. Professor Caldwell contacted me months ago about your situation. We decided it would be useful to remove Victor and replace him with someone more controllable." "Meaning me," Marcus smiled. "Meaning my daughter, who I can guide, advise, who understands the value of family loyalty." "I haven't spoken to you in 7 years. What makes you think I'm loyal?" "Because you just spent 7 years preparing the most sophisticated revenge plot I've ever seen. That takes patience, discipline, and the ability to play a long game. Those are my genes, Elena. You're more like me than you want to admit." He was right, and she hated that he was right. "If I agree to this," she said slowly, "what happens to Victor?" "He goes to prison. Federal minimum security, probably 4 to 6 years if he cooperates. When he gets out, he disappears. New identity, enough money to live comfortably, if not luxuriously, and a very clear understanding that he never speaks about Hale Analytics or anyone associated with it ever again." "And Brianna? Ms. Cross will face her own consequences, though I suspect she'll turn state's evidence and walk away with probation and a book deal. She's smarter than Victor gave her credit for." Elena turned away from the window. "I need time to think." "You have until 6 a.m. tomorrow. That's when I need to make calls to set the board vote. If you're not ready to commit by then, I'll support the settlement offer, and you'll be out. The company will find other ways to deal with the IP issues." "How?" "There are always ways, Elena. Legal challenges to the trust structure. Questions about your mental competency when it was created. Sudden discoveries of prior art that invalidate key patents. If we can't bring you in, we'll discredit you. It's not personal, it's just business." The car ride back to Queens was silent. Elena's mind was racing, trying to process everything Marcus had told her. She'd thought she was playing chess, but she'd been playing checkers. The game was so much bigger and more complicated than she'd imagined. When she got back to the apartment, Mrs. Chen was waiting in the hallway, anxious. "Everything okay? I heard noises from the twins." "I'm fine. Thank you, Mrs. Chen." Elena pressed $40 into the woman's hand, money she couldn't really afford to spend, but the kindness had to be acknowledged. Inside, the twins were still asleep, but Lucas had kicked off his blanket. Elena tucked him back in, her hands shaking. What was she supposed to do? Accept her father's devil's bargain and become part of whatever shadowy network he represented? Or refuse and lose everything she'd fought for? She pulled out her phone and stared at Rebecca Choi's number. She should call her lawyer, explain what had happened, get professional advice. But something stopped her. Rebecca worked for Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most connected law firms in the country. How much did she know? How much was she part of the same system Marcus was describing? Trust no one. That's what her father had taught her back when she was young and still thought he was just being paranoid. Maybe he hadn't been paranoid at all. Elena sat on the pull-out couch and opened her laptop, a 7-year-old MacBook that barely functioned anymore. She started searching. Hale Analytics government contracts, intelligence community partnerships, defense contracts, predictive analytics applications and surveillance. What she found made her stomach turn. Her algorithm, the one she'd created to help optimize resource allocation in developing countries, to predict crop yields and water supply issues, to make the world better, had been weaponized. Hale Analytics sold predictive policing systems that civil rights groups said were inherently biased. They sold surveillance tools to authoritarian governments. They sold population management software that sounded an awful lot like tools for suppressing dissent. Victor had taken her work and turned it into a machine for control and oppression, all wrapped in the language of efficiency and optimization. And her father wanted her to continue that work, to accept it, to become part of it. Elena closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to her children breathe. She thought about the woman she'd been 7 years ago, brilliant, idealistic, convinced that technology could save the world if applied with good intentions. That woman had been naive, but she'd also been right about one thing. Intention mattered. What you built mattered. How you built it mattered. Taking control of Hale Analytics wouldn't just be about revenge or reclaiming her work. It would be about deciding what that work became, whether it continued down Victor's path or whether it could be redirected towards something better. But could she do that while working with her father? Could she take his support and then betray his expectations? Could she be that ruthless? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your father's offer expires in 4 hours, but you should know there are other options. If you're interested in discussing them, reply to this message." A friend. Elena stared at the text. Another player in the game, another person who wanted something from her. Another deal, another bargain, another compromise. She was so tired of being everyone's pawn, but maybe that was the problem. Maybe she'd been thinking about this all wrong. Everyone wanted to use her. Victor, her father, the mysterious friend texting her at 2 a.m. They all saw her as a means to an end. What if she stopped trying to win their game and started playing her own? Elena typed a reply. "I'm listening." The response came immediately. "Coffee shop on the corner of your building. 20 minutes. Come alone." She looked at the twins again. This was insane. She should stay here, lock the door, wait for morning, and call Rebecca and figure this out like a rational person. But rational people didn't end up where Elena was. Rational people took the 100 million and disappeared. Elena wasn't rational anymore. She was furious. And she was done being afraid. She checked on the twins one more time, made sure the door was locked from the inside, and slipped out. The coffee shop was a 24-hour diner that served watery coffee and day-old donuts. At 2:30 in the morning, it was nearly empty. A woman sat in the back booth, facing the door. She was in her 40s, dark-skinned, wearing jeans and a Columbia hoodie. She looked like a grad student, not a corporate player. "Elena," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Thanks for coming. I'm Dr. Amara Johnson. I used to work for Hale Analytics. I quit 2 years ago when I figured out what they were really doing with your algorithm. Elena slid into the booth, suspicious and intrigued in equal measure. How did you get my number? I still have friends inside the company, people who are as disgusted as I was, people who want to see things change. Amara pushed a folder across the table. This is everything I could gather before I left. Documentation of every questionable contract, every ethics violation, every time Victor or the board made a decision that put profits over people. It's not enough to bring criminal charges, but it's enough to destroy the company's reputation if it goes public. Elena opened the folder, page after page of damning evidence. Why are you giving this to me? Because you have something none of us had. Legal standing. You own the core technology. You can force changes from the inside, but not if you take your father's deal. You know about that? Your father isn't as subtle as he thinks he is. And he's not the only player trying to control you right now. There's another group, former employees, ethics advocates, tech industry reformers. We want to help you take control of Hale Analytics, but actually take control. Not just become another puppet on a different set of strings. What's the catch? Amara smiled. The catch is that we can't offer you your father's protection. If you go this route, you're going to make some very powerful enemies, people who've been profiting from the current system. They'll fight back and they'll fight dirty. But at least you'll be fighting for something real. Elena looked down at the folder in her hands. 2 paths. Her father's way, safe, protected, compromised. Or this way, dangerous, uncertain, but her own. The choice should have been harder. What do you need from me? She asked. Amara's smile widened. First, we need you to not take your father's deal. Second, we need you to trust us enough to coordinate our next moves. And third, we need you to be ready for the board meeting tomorrow morning, because we're going to turn it into a declaration of war. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat at her tiny dining table reading through Amara's folder while the city slowly woke up around her. Every page was worse than the last. Predictive policing algorithms sold to cities with documented racial bias problems. Surveillance contracts with governments that disappeared journalists. Population tracking systems marketed as public health tools, but used to monitor dissidents. Her algorithm, her work, twisted into something she barely recognized. By 5 a.m., she'd made her decision. She texted her father a single word. No. His response came 30 seconds later. You're making a mistake you'll regret. Don't call me when this falls apart. She didn't plan to. At 6 a.m., Rebecca Choi called. The board meeting is at 10. I've been formally notified that you're not welcome to attend as you're not a shareholder or employee. They're going to try to resolve this without you in the room. Can they do that? Legally, it's complicated. You own the underlying IP, but you're not technically part of the corporate structure. They'll argue this is an internal business matter. What if I became part of the corporate structure? Silence. Then Rebecca's voice came back sharp with interest. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I want to buy shares, enough to demand a board seat. Elena, a single share of Hale Analytics is trading at $412 right now, even after the drop. You'd need millions to buy a meaningful stake. What if I had millions? Another pause. Elena could almost hear Rebecca's mind working through the implications. Do you have millions? Not yet, but I will by 9 a.m. Can you meet me at the company headquarters? Bring everything we need to execute a stock purchase and demand emergency board representation. This is insane. Probably. Are you in? Rebecca laughed, surprised and delighted. Hell yes, I'm in. This is either going to be spectacular or a complete disaster. Either way, it'll be one for the textbooks. Elena hung up and immediately called Amara. I need to liquidate the Minerva Trust, all of it. How fast can we move? The trust holds the patent, Elena. If you liquidate it, you lose control of the IP. I'm not liquidating the patent. I'm licensing it. Emergency licensing to the trust itself, which then sells those licenses to the highest bidder. We have 3 hours to find buyers willing to pay premium rates for guaranteed access to APNM technology. She could hear Amara's sharp intake of breath. That's brilliant and completely insane. We'd need corporate lawyers, IP specialists, brokers. You said you had friends who wanted to help. I need them. All of them. Now. What followed was the most chaotic 3 hours of Elena's life. Mrs. Chen came over to watch the twins. Elena pressed $200 into her hands and promised to explain everything later. Amara arrived with 4 other people, former Hale Analytics employees who'd been waiting for this moment. They turned Elena's tiny apartment into a war room, laptops covering every surface, phones ringing constantly. The first license sold for $12 million to a healthcare analytics firm in Boston. The second went for $15 million to a European consortium. By 8 a.m., they'd moved $47 million in emergency licensing deals, with another $30 million in pending negotiations. Elena stood in her bathroom, staring at her reflection. She was wearing the same faded dress from the custody hearing. She literally owned nothing better. But her eyes looked different, harder, clearer. Her phone rang. Marcus Whitmore. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Yes? What the hell do you think you're doing? Her father's voice was ice. You're flooding the market with APNM licenses. You're devaluing Hale Analytics' core competitive advantage. I'm exercising my legal right to monetize my intellectual property. You're destroying billions in shareholder value. Good. Maybe they'll be motivated to negotiate with me seriously. She hung up before he could respond. By 9:15, Elena was standing outside Hale Analytics headquarters in Midtown Manhattan with Rebecca, Amara, and $43 million in cleared funds sitting in a brokerage account. She'd spent the last of the morning buying shares on the open market. The price was dropping as news of the licensing deals spread, which meant her money went further than expected. She now owned 4.2% of Hale Analytics. Not enough for a board seat under normal circumstances, but combined with the IP ownership and the chaos of Victor's arrest, it was enough to force a conversation. The building was glass and steel, 70 stories of corporate ambition. Elena had been here exactly 3 times during her marriage. Victor had always kept his work life separate, claimed she'd be bored by the business side. She understood now that he'd been keeping her away from people who might ask inconvenient questions about the algorithm's origins. Security tried to stop them in the lobby. Rebecca produced documentation showing Elena's shareholder status and threatened to call the SEC if they weren't allowed to attend the public portions of the board meeting. It was a bluff. There were no public portions, but the security guard didn't know that. He made a call, spoke to someone in hushed tones, then reluctantly directed them to the executive floor. The elevator ride up was silent. Elena's heart was hammering so hard she thought Rebecca might hear it. This was it. No more preparation, no more planning. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine everything. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that screamed expensive minimalism. A young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile stood up from behind a desk, made of what looked like a single piece of marble. I'm sorry, but the board meeting is closed to... I'm a shareholder, Elena said, walking past her, and I'm invoking my right to address the board on matters of material concern to the company. You can't just... Rebecca stepped in front of the receptionist. Section 14.3 of the New York Business Corporation Law. Any shareholder may petition the board during a meeting regarding matters affecting shareholder value. Refusing access could be grounds for a derivative lawsuit. Shall we test that in court? The receptionist's smile cracked. She picked up her phone, spoke quickly, then hung up looking flustered. Mr. Park will be right out. They didn't have to wait long. A man in his 30s emerged from the conference room, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Ward, I'm James Park, interim chairman of the board. This is highly irregular. So is the CEO being arrested for fraud, Elena said. I think we're past worried about irregular. James studied her for a moment, then made a decision. 5 minutes. You can make a statement to the board, but you don't get to participate in deliberations or votes. That's all I need. He led them into the conference room, and Elena's breath caught despite herself. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan. A table that could seat 30 people stretched the length of the room, and seated around it were some of the most powerful people in tech and finance, venture capitalists, former government officials, CEOs of major corporations, and her father, sitting at the far end, his expression unreadable. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced, we have an unexpected visitor. Elena Ward, estranged wife of Victor Hale and recent shareholder. She's requested time to address the board. 11 faces turned to look at her, some curious, some annoyed, some openly hostile. Elena recognized Catherine Park, the lawyer who'd offered her the settlement. She recognized two board members from their appearances in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The others were strangers, but their body language screamed power and impatience. "Mrs. Ward," James said, gesturing to an empty chair, "you have 5 minutes." Elena didn't sit. Standing felt stronger. "Thank you for seeing me. I know you'd all prefer I wasn't here. You'd prefer I'd taken the settlement offer and disappeared quietly, but I'm not going to do that, and I want to explain why." She pulled out her phone and connected it to the conference room display system. Amara had helped her prepare a presentation. Nothing fancy, just facts and figures. This is Hale Analytics' revenue breakdown for the past 3 years. As you can see, 78% of total revenue comes from products directly utilizing the APNM algorithm or its derivatives. The algorithm I created. The algorithm I own. The first slide showed the numbers in stark clarity. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "This morning, I executed licensing agreements with 17 companies, granting them access to APNM technology. Total value of those licenses, $73 million. But more importantly, those licenses mean Hale Analytics is no longer the exclusive provider of APNM-based solutions. Your competitive advantage just evaporated." A woman in her 60s with silver hair and a Chanel suit leaned forward. "You're destroying your own asset value. Those licenses devalue the technology." "No," Elena said calmly. "They demonstrate market value independent of Hale Analytics. They prove that my IP has worth beyond this company, and they give me leverage." "Leverage for what?" James asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "I want a board seat. I want Chief Technology Officer authority over all APNM implementation. And I want immediate termination of all contracts with authoritarian governments, all predictive policing systems that haven't been independently audited for bias, and all surveillance tools being used to suppress dissent." The room erupted. "Absolutely not." A heavy-set man in his 50s slammed his hand on the table. "You can't just walk in here and make demands. Those contracts are worth billions. This is extortion." James raised his hand for silence. "Mrs. Ward, what you're proposing would fundamentally alter the company's business model and destroy significant revenue streams. The board would never agree to that." "Then I'll license APNM to your competitors at rates that undercut every product you have. I'll flood the market until Hale Analytics' stock price crashes, and then I'll buy up shares at pennies on the dollar and take control that way. It'll take longer and hurt more people, but I'll get there eventually." Marcus Whitmore finally spoke. "You're bluffing. You don't have the capital or the knowledge to execute that strategy." "Don't I?" Elena advanced the presentation to the next slide. "These are the people helping me. Dr. Amara Johnson, former head of your Ethics Compliance Division. Dr. Robert Chen, who designed your data architecture. Sarah Martinez, who ran business development for 3 years. James Thompson, who knows every client relationship you have. They all quit because they couldn't stomach what this company was doing, and now they're working with me." She let that sink in. "Between us, we have insider knowledge of every contract, every algorithm implementation, every weakness in your corporate structure. We can compete with you, undermine you, and ultimately destroy you. Or you can work with me." The silver-haired woman leaned back in her chair, reassessing. "What exactly do you want?" "I told you, board seat, CTO authority, and immediate ethical review of all existing contracts. Plus 40% of company stock transferred to the Minerva Trust in exchange for exclusive APNM licensing rights." 40%? The heavy-set man looked apoplectic. "That would make you the largest single shareholder." "Yes, it would, and it would align my interests with the company's long-term success rather than short-term profit maximization. I'm not trying to destroy Hale Analytics. I'm trying to save it from itself." "By gutting our most profitable divisions?" Catherine Park asked, her tone skeptical. "How is that saving anything?" Elena changed slides again. This one showed news articles and investigative reports. "In the past 6 months alone, 3 major clients have been subject to international human rights investigations. 2 are facing sanctions. Your predictive policing system in Detroit was linked to wrongful arrests that cost the city $40 million in settlements. And your surveillance contract with the UAE is currently being investigated by the European Parliament." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. This company is a scandal waiting to explode. When it does, and it will, you'll all be implicated. Your reputations will be destroyed. Some of you might face criminal charges. Victor's arrest was just the beginning. The federal prosecutors are looking at the entire operation now. That got their attention. Elena could see the calculation happening behind their eyes, weighing risk against reward, reputation against profit. I'm offering you a way out, she continued, a way to restructure ethically before you're forced to by courts or public outcry. We can rebuild this company into something legitimate, something that uses APNM technology to actually help people instead of oppressing them. And we can do it while maintaining profitability, just different profits from different sources. That's naive, Marcus said coldly. The defense and intelligence contracts are where the real money is. Consumer applications will never generate the same revenue. Then maybe we don't need the same revenue, Elena shot back. Maybe we need sustainable revenue from sources that won't destroy us when the political winds shift. Because they will shift, Father. They always do. And when they do, the companies that profited from oppression are the first to fall. The room went very quiet. Using Father had been deliberate, a reminder that Marcus had skin in this game beyond just money. His daughter was the one threatening to burn down his investment. James Park cleared his throat. Mrs. Ward, I appreciate your passion, but what you're proposing would require unanimous board approval. That's unlikely. I don't need unanimous approval. I need 6 votes out of 11, and I think I have them. She pulled out another document, laying it on the table. These are signed letters from 4 institutional investors who collectively control 32% of Hale Analytics stock. They've agreed to vote their shares in favor of my appointment to the board and my restructuring plan. Combined with my 4.2%, that's 36.2%. I need to persuade exactly 3 of you to reach the majority. Catherine Park picked up the document, scanning it quickly. Her expression shifted from skepticism to alarm. These are legitimate. How did you— I spent last night making calls, Elena said. Turns out a lot of your major investors are getting nervous about the FBI investigation. They're looking for someone who can provide adult supervision and clean up Victor's mess. I offered to be that someone. The silver-haired woman smiled slightly. I underestimated you, Mrs. Ward. That was foolish of me. You're not the first, Elena said. That's been working in my favor for years. James looked at the other board members, then back at Elena. If we were to consider this, and I'm not saying we are, what exactly would your restructuring plan look like? Specifics, please. Elena had prepared for this. She advanced to the next slide. Phase 1. Immediate termination of all contracts with governments that score below 60 on the Democracy Index. That eliminates the UAE, Saudi, and 3 other clients. Revenue loss of approximately $400 million annually. $400 million. The heavyset man looked like he might have a stroke. Phase 2, Elena continued, ignoring him. Independent audit of all predictive policing systems by a third-party civil rights organization. Any system showing racial bias gets pulled from the market until it can be fixed. Revenue impact roughly $200 million. You're proposing we lose $600 million in annual revenue? Catherine shook her head. The stock price would crater. Phase 3, Elena said. Redirect R&D into healthcare applications, environmental modeling, and humanitarian logistics. I've already had preliminary conversations with the WHO, Doctors Without Borders, and 3 major healthcare systems. Conservative estimate, $200 million in new contracts within 18 months, scaling to $800 million within 3 years. That made them pause. The numbers were aggressive, but not impossible. Phase 4, rebrand the company. New name, new mission statement, new leadership. Distance ourselves from Victor and everything he built. Position Hale Analytics, or whatever we call it, as the ethical choice in predictive analytics. We become the company corporations hire when they want to avoid the scandals that are about to hit our less scrupulous competitors. James leaned forward. You sound very confident about these incoming scandals. I have friends in journalism, Elena said. They're sitting on stories about the industry that would make Victor's arrest look minor. When those stories break, companies are going to need clean alternatives. We can be that alternative. She could see minds changing. Not all of them, but enough. The board members who cared more about long-term sustainability than short-term profits were starting to see the logic. Marcus stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're asking us to abandon our most lucrative business model based on speculation and idealism. I vote no. Absolutely not. I expected that, Father, Elena said. But you're only one vote. The silver-haired woman raised her hand. I'm Margaret Chen, by the way, lead investor from Chen Ventures. I think Mrs. Ward's plan has merit. The ethical review alone could save us from the kind of liability that destroyed other tech companies. I vote yes. One vote. A younger man in a sharp suit spoke up. David Richardson, Goldman Sachs. I'm concerned about the revenue impact, but I'm more concerned about the reputational risk if we don't act. The FBI investigation is going to uncover things that will make us all uncomfortable. Getting ahead of that has value. I vote yes. 2 votes. The heavy-set man shook his head violently. Alan Foster, Foster Capital. This is insane. We'd be giving up proven revenue for pie-in-the-sky promises. No. Absolutely no. Catherine Park surprised Elena by speaking up. I've been this company's general counsel for 6 years. I've watched us make increasingly questionable decisions in pursuit of growth. Mrs. Ward is right. We're headed for a reckoning. Better to control the narrative now. I vote yes. 3 votes. Elena was halfway there. The remaining board members exchanged glances. Elena recognized the calculus happening. Nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of history, but nobody wanted to sacrifice profits either. A woman in her 40s with dark skin and calculating eyes finally spoke. Veronica Martinez, Tech Forward VC. Question, Mrs. Ward. You say you want to rebuild this company ethically, but you've spent the last week systematically destroying your husband, manipulating the legal system, and leveraging private information for public gain. How do we know you won't do the same to us? It was a fair question. Elena met her gaze steadily. Because Victor betrayed me personally. He stole my work, abandoned his children, and tried to erase my existence. You haven't done that. If you work with me honestly, I'll work with you honestly. But if you try to cheat me or undermine me, then yes, I'll respond in kind. That's not a threat. It's just transparency about how I operate now. Veronica smiled slightly. I appreciate honesty, though I'm not sure I trust it coming from someone as skilled at deception as you've proven to be. Then don't trust me, Elena said. Trust the institutional investors who've already committed. Trust the fact that I have more to gain from success than sabotage. Trust that I'm a mother who wants to build something her children won't be ashamed of. Veronica considered this, then nodded. Conditional yes. I want quarterly reviews of the restructuring plan with concrete metrics. If we're not hitting targets, the plan gets reassessed. Deal? Deal. 4 votes. 2 more board members, a retired admiral and a tech industry veteran, voted no, siding with Marcus. That put the count at 6 no, 4 yes. Elena needed 2 more votes from the remaining board member. The last holdout was a woman in her early 30s with bright red hair and a Stanford hoodie under a blazer. She'd been silent throughout the entire discussion, just taking notes on a tablet. Dr. Sarah Kim, she finally said, I'm the technical representative on this board. I actually understand how APNM works, unlike most everyone else here. She looked directly at Elena. I've read your original papers. I know you created the core algorithm. I also know Victor made significant improvements that enabled commercial scaling. So my question is, are you technically competent enough to run CTO operations? Or are you just leveraging your IP ownership? Elena had been dreading this question. The honest answer was that she'd been out of active research for 7 years. Her technical skills were rusty. She'd spent the last week teaching herself everything Victor had done with her algorithm, but there was a lot she didn't know. She could lie. Pretend she knew more than she did. But Veronica had been right. Honesty might be her best play here. I'm not as sharp as I was 7 years ago, Elena admitted. Raising twins while dealing with depression doesn't leave much time for staying current with technical literature. But I learn fast. I have a team of former employees who know the codebase intimately, and I created the foundational mathematics that everything else is built on. Give me 6 months and I'll be fluent again. In the meantime, I'm smart enough to hire people smarter than me and actually listen to them, which is more than Victor ever did. Sarah studied her, expressionless. Then she smiled. That's the right answer. Victor always pretended to know everything. Drove the engineering team crazy. Okay, I'm in. Yes vote. 5 votes. One more. James Park had been silent for the last few minutes, clearly thinking through the implications. As interim chairman, his vote carried symbolic weight, even if it wasn't technically worth more. Mrs. Ward, he said finally, if we do this, if we give you a board seat and CTO authority, you understand there's no going back? You'll be accountable for every decision, every outcome. If the restructuring fails, it's on you. I understand. And you understand that some of us will be watching for any sign you're not up to the task? That this board will remain divided and difficult? I'm married to Victor Hale, Elena said dryly. I'm very familiar with difficult men who underestimate me. That got a few chuckles, breaking the tension slightly. James looked around the table one more time, reading the room. Then he nodded slowly. I'm not convinced this will work, but I'm convinced that the status quo is untenable. We need change, and Mrs. Ward is offering a path forward. It might not be the path I'd choose, but it's better than paralysis. I vote yes. 6 votes. They had it. Marcus stood up so abruptly his chair rolled backward. This is a mistake. You're all making a catastrophic mistake, and when this company collapses, don't expect me to bail you out. Noted, Margaret Chen said coolly. Motion passes 6-5. Welcome to the board, Mrs. Ward. Elena's knees felt weak. She'd done it, actually done it. Against all odds, against her father's machinations, against the board's resistance, she'd won. But the look on Marcus's face as he walked out told her this was far from over. The meeting continued for another hour, handling procedural matters and immediate crisis management. Elena was formally appointed to the board and given interim CTO authority pending a more thorough transition plan. James agreed to stay on as chairman for 90 days to help stabilize operations. When they finally broke for lunch, Elena found herself surrounded by board members wanting to introduce themselves properly, assess her up close, and figure out how to work with this unexpected disruption to their carefully ordered world. Margaret Chen pulled her aside. That was impressive, genuinely impressive. But you should know your father is not someone who forgives easily. He will retaliate. I know. Do you? Because Marcus Whitmore has resources most people can't imagine, and he's patient. He'll wait years for the right opportunity to hurt you. Then I'll be ready, Elena said, with more confidence than she felt. She excused herself and found a private conference room to call Rebecca. We did it. I'm on the board. Rebecca's whoop of victory was loud enough that Elena had to pull the phone away from her ear. I knew it. I knew you could pull this off. Elena, do you understand what you just did? You didn't just win a legal case. You just executed a corporate coup. I know. And now comes the hard part, actually delivering on everything I promised. One problem at a time, Rebecca said. For now, just enjoy the win. But Elena couldn't enjoy it. Not yet, because her phone was already buzzing with a new text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your board seat. You've made powerful enemies today. Some of them are closer than you think. Be careful, Elena. Not everyone who voted yes is actually on your side. She deleted the text, but the message lingered. Someone on that board had ulterior motives. Someone was playing a longer game than she understood. Elena returned to the main conference room, where lunch had been brought in, expensive catering, the kind Victor used to bring home, and she'd eat while feeding the twins. The board members were mingling, talking in hushed tones, already forming new alliances based on the morning's power shift. Sarah Kim approached her. Hey, so I meant what I said about Victor. He was terrible at listening to the engineering team. If you actually want to understand what's in the code base, I can help. But fair warning, some of what you're going to find is pretty ugly. How ugly? Sarah lowered her voice. There are features in our surveillance products that aren't in any documentation, backdoors that even our clients don't know about. I've been documenting them for months, waiting for the right time to raise alarms. Maybe now is that time. Elena felt her stomach drop. Who knows about these backdoors? That's the question, isn't it? Sarah glanced around the room. Someone on this board almost certainly authorized them, which means someone here is going to be very unhappy when you start digging into technical architecture. Do you know who? No, but I have suspicions. Sarah pulled out her phone, typed quickly, then showed Elena a document. This is every board vote on technical infrastructure for the past 3 years. Notice anything interesting? Elena scanned the votes. Most were unanimous or near unanimous, but 3 votes had split the board, and the same 3 people had voted no each time. Margaret Chen, David Richardson, and Catherine Park. They were trying to stop the back doors? Elena asked. I think so. Which means the other 7 approved them, including your father. Of course he did. Marcus wouldn't resist a tool that gave him leverage and control. Get me everything, Elena said. Every back door, every undocumented feature, every ethical violation you've been tracking. I want the full picture. Are you sure? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you'll have to decide what to do with the information. I'm sure. Sarah nodded. Okay. I'll compile everything and send it to you tonight. Just be ready. This is going to be worse than you think. She walked away, leaving Elena alone with the growing certainty that winning the board seat had only been the first battle. The real war was just beginning, and she was going to have to make choices that would define not just her future, but the future of everyone who depended on Hale Analytics technology. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Amara. Turn on CNN, now. Elena found a TV in an empty office and switched it on. The breaking news banner made her blood run cold. Federal prosecutors expand Hale Analytics investigation. Board members may face charges. The reporter was standing outside the federal courthouse. Sources close to the investigation tell CNN that prosecutors are examining whether members of Hale Analytics' board of directors were aware of and complicit in CEO Victor Hale's financial crimes. If charges are filed, this could become one of the largest corporate corruption cases in recent history. Elena's phone started ringing. Rebecca. Are you seeing this? Yeah, what does it mean for us? It means everyone on that board is now a potential defendant, which means they're all going to be looking for ways to protect themselves. And the easiest way to do that is to cooperate with prosecutors and offer up bigger fish. You think they'll turn on each other? I think they already are, Rebecca said grimly. The question is, who's the biggest fish they're going to offer up? Because right now, Elena, you're the newest member of that board. And you're the one with the most documented connection to the company's core technology. If prosecutors need a narrative about who really knew what was happening, she didn't have to finish the sentence. Elena understood. She'd fought so hard to get into the room, and now that room might be on fire with everyone looking for the exits. What do I do? Don't talk to anyone without me present. Not the feds, not other board members, not reporters. And start thinking about whether you want to stay on this board or get out while you still can. Elena looked around the expensive office, at the Manhattan skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, at the trappings of the power she'd just claimed. She thought about her twins, still with Mrs. Chen, blissfully unaware that their mother had just walked into the center of a federal investigation. She thought about Victor, sitting in a federal detention facility, probably already negotiating his cooperation agreement. She thought about her father, who'd just lost a major vote and would be looking for revenge. And she thought about all the people who'd trusted her, Amara, Sarah, the former employees who'd risked their careers to help her, the investors who'd backed her play. I'm not getting out, she told Rebecca. I'm going to fix this. All of it. Elena, I know it's crazy. I know it's probably impossible. But I didn't come this far just to run when things get hard. I'm seeing this through. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then, okay, then we'd better get you the best criminal defense attorney in New York, because if you're staying in that building, you're going to need one. Elena hung up and walked back to the conference room. The board members looked up as she entered, and she could see the new calculation in their eyes. She wasn't just the idealistic outsider anymore. She was a potential liability, a wild card, someone who might have to be eliminated before she caused more damage. Let them think that. Let them underestimate her one more time. Because Elena Ward had learned something important over the past 7 years. The most dangerous person in any room was the one nobody took seriously until it was too late. And she was just getting started. The federal subpoena arrived at Elena's apartment 3 days after the CNN report broke. A polite young woman in a gray suit handed her the envelope while Maya and Lucas ate breakfast cereal, blissfully unaware that their mother's life was imploding in slow motion. "Elena Ward?" the woman asked, though she clearly already knew. "Yes." "You've been subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury investigating Hale Analytics Corporation. The hearing is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. You're required to bring all documentation relating to the company's formation, the APNM algorithm, and any communications with Victor Hale or board members regarding company operations." Elena took the envelope with numb fingers. "I haven't done anything wrong." The woman's expression was professionally neutral. "The subpoena doesn't accuse you of wrongdoing, ma'am. It requires your testimony as a witness. I'd recommend getting legal representation before Monday." She left, and Elena stood in her doorway holding federal court papers while her children argued about who got the toy from the cereal box. The absurdity of the contrast almost made her laugh. Rebecca arrived within the hour, bringing with her a criminal defense attorney named Michael Torres. He was in his 50s, ex-prosecutor, with the kind of reputation that made other lawyers nervous. He also charged $800 an hour, which meant Elena's newfound wealth was about to evaporate into legal fees. "The good news," Michael said, spreading the subpoena on Elena's dining table, "is that this is a witness subpoena, not a target letter. They're not accusing you of crimes, yet." "Yet?" Elena's voice came out sharper than intended. "Federal investigations are fluid. Today's witness can become tomorrow's defendant if the evidence shifts. We need to be very careful about what you say and how you say it." Rebecca leaned forward. "What are they actually investigating? The subpoena language is vague." Michael pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I have contacts at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Off the record, they're building a massive case: wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. Victor's arrest was just the opening act. They're going after the entire board for conspiracy to defraud investors and regulatory capture." "Regulatory capture?" Elena asked. "Bribing or influencing government officials to look the other way. Hale Analytics had contracts with multiple federal agencies. The prosecutors think some of those contracts were awarded through illegal means. If they can prove board members knew about it and approved it, that's criminal conspiracy." Elena felt sick. "I just joined the board last week. How can they implicate me in things that happened years ago?" "They can't directly, but they can question you about what you knew and when you knew it. They can ask about conversations you had with Victor during your marriage. They can use you to build a timeline of when the illegal activity started and who was involved." "So they want to use me against Victor?" "Against Victor, against your father, against everyone. You're the perfect witness. You were inside the marriage, but outside the company. You have technical knowledge of the core technology, but no involvement in the business decisions. And you have motivation to tell the truth, since Victor screwed you over." Rebecca interjected. "But testifying could also expose Elena to perjury charges if the prosecutors think she's lying or withholding information. And it could make her a target for retaliation from the other board members." "Exactly," Michael said. "Which is why we need to decide right now what your strategy is. Do you cooperate fully and hope for immunity? Do you invoke the Fifth Amendment and risk looking guilty? Do you try to negotiate a cooperation agreement that protects you while giving them what they want?" Elena looked at her children. Lucas had given up on the cereal toy and was now building something with blocks. Maya was singing to herself, making up words that didn't quite rhyme. They had no idea their world was balanced on a knife's edge. "I want to tell the truth," Elena said quietly, "but I don't want to destroy people who don't deserve it." Michael's expression was grim. "In a federal investigation, you don't get to pick and choose. Once you start talking, they'll ask about everything and everyone. If you hold back, they'll know. And if they think you're protecting someone, they'll assume you're complicit too. Then what do I do? You need to decide who you're willing to sacrifice and who you're willing to protect. Because make no mistake, Elena, someone is going down for this. Multiple someones. The only question is whether you're one of them." Before she could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number again. She was learning to hate those. "Don't answer," Michael warned, but Elena's finger was already on the button. "Elena Ward." "Mrs. Ward, this is Special Agent Karen Mitchell. We met briefly at your custody hearing when we arrested your husband, the FBI agent from the courtroom. Elena put the phone on speaker so her lawyers could hear. I remember. What can I do for you, Agent Mitchell? I'd like to meet with you. Informal conversation, off the record. You're not in trouble, but I think we could help each other. Michael was shaking his head violently, making slashing motions across his throat. Elena ignored him. Help each other how? You want to clean up Hale Analytics, make it ethical, stop the abuses. I want to prosecute the people who turned predictive analytics into a weapon against civil rights. Our goals align, Mrs. Ward, but I can't build my case without your cooperation. My client will be happy to testify at the grand jury hearing as required by subpoena, Michael cut in, grabbing the phone. Any other communication should go through her attorney. This conversation is over. He hung up, his face flushed. Do not talk to federal agents without me present, ever. That's rule number 1 of not going to prison. She said I'm not in trouble. They always say that. Michael's composure cracked slightly. Elena, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen brilliant people destroy their lives because they thought cooperating would protect them. The FBI doesn't want to help you. They want to use you. Everything you say can and will be twisted to fit whatever narrative they're building. Rebecca put a hand on Elena's arm. He's right. The stakes are too high for informal conversations. Everything goes through Michael now. Elena nodded, feeling the walls closing in. She'd fought so hard to take control of her life, and now she was surrounded by lawyers telling her to stay silent, federal agents wanting her testimony, and board members who saw her as either an asset or a threat. Her phone buzzed with a text. This time, it was from Sarah Kim. Emergency, need to meet, now, can't talk on phones. Elena showed the text to Rebecca, who frowned. Could be a trap. Board members trying to get you to say something incriminating. Or it could be legitimate, Elena countered. Sarah was the one who warned me about the backdoors in the code. If something's happened, then she can tell your lawyer in a formal setting, Michael said firmly. But Elena was already texting back. Coffee shop on 47th in 30 minutes. Michael threw up his hands. You're going to get yourself indicted. Probably, but I can't sit here doing nothing while everything falls apart. She left the lawyers arguing in her apartment and headed to Midtown. The coffee shop was crowded with lunch rush, which made it both safer and more dangerous. Harder to have a private conversation, but also harder for anyone to eavesdrop effectively. Sarah was already there, hunched in a corner booth, looking exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was drinking what looked like her 4th or 5th espresso. Thanks for coming, Sarah said as Elena slid into the seat across from her. I know your lawyers probably told you not to. They did. I'm here anyway. What's wrong? Sarah pulled out her laptop, angling the screen so only Elena could see. Remember I said I'd compile all the undocumented features in our code? I finished last night. Elena, it's worse than I thought. Much worse. The screen showed lines of code, documentation, flowcharts. To anyone else, it would have been gibberish, but Elena's PhD training kicked in, and she started to understand what she was seeing. This is a root access protocol, she said slowly, in the surveillance software. It would let someone bypass all the client's security and access their entire network. Not just access, Sarah corrected. Modify, delete, plant evidence, whatever they want. And it's not just in one product. It's in everything. Every single piece of software Hale Analytics has sold for the past 4 years has a hidden backdoor that gives us, or someone, complete control over the client's systems. Elena felt her blood run cold. Who authorized this? That's what I've been trying to figure out. The code commits are attributed to a user called Architect. That account has board-level access, but it's not tied to any specific person. Whoever Architect is, they've been very careful to hide their identity. Could it be Victor? Maybe. But the commits started in 2019, and some of them happened when Victor was provably somewhere else. Conference keynotes, overseas trips, times when he was on camera or had dozens of witnesses. I don't think he was Architect. I think someone else on the board was running this operation, and Victor either didn't know or was complicit in covering it up. Elena's mind was racing. If this gets out, if our clients discover we've had backdoor access to their systems for years, the company is finished, Sarah finished. Lawsuits, criminal charges, Complete loss of trust. Every contract gets canceled. We'd be lucky to avoid prison time. Then why are you showing me this? Sarah met her eyes. Because you said you wanted to fix the company. Make it ethical. But you can't fix this, Elena. This is too big, too deep. The only ethical choice is to expose it, accept the consequences, and shut the whole thing down. But that means destroying everything you just fought to win. So I'm asking you, what do you want to do? It was the same question Michael had asked in different words. What was Elena willing to sacrifice? How far was she willing to go? Who else knows about this? Elena asked. Just me? And now you? I haven't told anyone else because I wasn't sure who to trust. For all I know, Architect is still on the board. Could be anyone. Elena thought about the board members. Margaret Chen, who'd supported her restructuring plan. David Richardson from Goldman Sachs. Catherine Park, the general counsel. James Park, the interim chairman. Veronica Martinez, the retired admiral. The tech industry veteran. And her father, Marcus Whitmore, who'd admitted to being part of the complex ecosystem that kept Hale Analytics profitable and protected. Any of them could be Architect. All of them had motive and means. Can you trace the code back to a specific computer or IP address? I tried. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. The commits route through VPNs and proxy servers all over the world. I can tell you the code was written by someone with deep knowledge of our architecture and board-level access credentials, but that's it. Elena's phone buzzed. Text from Margaret Chen. Board emergency meeting in 1 hour. Mandatory attendance. Federal prosecutors have contacted several members. We need to coordinate response. She showed Sarah the text. This is it. They're circling the wagons. What are you going to do? Elena looked at the code on Sarah's screen, at the evidence of systematic betrayal of every client who'd trusted Hale Analytics. She thought about Agent Mitchell's offer to help her clean up the company. She thought about the grand jury subpoena waiting at her apartment. And she thought about what Victor would do in this situation. Lie, deflect, blame others, save himself at any cost. She was not Victor. I'm going to that board meeting, Elena said, and I'm going to tell them everything. About the back doors, about the investigation, about all of it. And then I'm going to give them one chance to do the right thing. They won't take it, Sarah said. They'll vote to destroy the evidence and cover this up. That's what corporations do. Probably, but I have to try. And if they refuse, then I go to the FBI myself and burn it all down. Sarah stared at her. You're serious. You'd actually destroy your own company. It's not my company if it's built on lies and exploitation, Elena said. I wanted to reclaim my work, but not like this. Never like this. She left the coffee shop and headed to Hale Analytics headquarters. The emergency board meeting was in the same conference room where she'd won her seat 3 days earlier. It felt like a lifetime ago. All 11 board members were present, though the atmosphere was radically different from last time. No casual mingling, no expensive catering. Everyone looked tense, worried, calculating their odds. James Park called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you know, several of us have been contacted by federal prosecutors. I've been advised by counsel that we need to coordinate our legal strategy and ensure we're presenting a unified front. Unified front? Margaret Chen's voice was sharp. Half this board should be lawyering up individually. The other half should be negotiating immunity deals. There's no unified front when the ship is sinking. Marcus Whitmore spoke up, his voice cold and controlled. The ship is only sinking if we panic. The prosecutors are fishing. They arrested Victor, they made some noise in the press, but they don't have evidence of board-level involvement in his crimes. If we stay disciplined and don't give them anything, this blows over. Does it? David Richardson pulled out his phone, showing an email. I received a subpoena this morning demanding all my communications with Victor for the past 5 years. My lawyers say that's a sign they're building a conspiracy case. This isn't blowing over, Marcus. This is just getting started. The room erupted in overlapping arguments. Elena let them argue for a few minutes, studying each person's reaction. Who was genuinely worried? Who was putting on a show? Who already knew more than they were saying? Finally, she stood up. There's something you all need to know. The room fell silent. I've been reviewing the company's technical architecture, Elena continued. Specifically, the code in our deployed products. And I've discovered that every major software package we've sold for the past 4 years contains undocumented backdoor access, root-level administrative control that would allow someone to completely compromise our clients' systems without their knowledge or consent. The silence that followed was absolute. Catherine Park found her voice first. That has to be a mistake. Our security audits would have caught something like that. The audits were fake, Elena said. Or the auditors were paid off. I have documentation proving the backdoors exist and have been actively maintained. Someone on this board, using the pseudonym Architect, has been building and deploying these backdoors systematically. She looked around the table, watching for reactions. Most looked shocked or horrified. But a few, Marcus, the retired admiral, and the tech industry veteran, looked more carefully neutral, as if they were calculating rather than reacting. This is absurd, Marcus said. Elena, you've been on this board for 3 days. You don't have the technical expertise or access to make these claims. I have a PhD in computational mathematics, Elena interrupted. I created the core algorithm your entire company is built on. Don't lecture me about technical expertise. The backdoors are real, they're in the code, and when the FBI finds them, and they will find them, everyone in this room is going to prison unless we act now. Veronica Martinez leaned forward. What kind of action are you proposing? Full disclosure, we go to the FBI ourselves, show them everything, cooperate completely. We offer to patch all the deployed code, notify affected clients, and accept whatever legal consequences come. It's the only way to maintain any credibility. That's corporate suicide, the retired admiral said flatly. The lawsuits alone would bankrupt us. The alternative is getting caught lying and covering up, Elena shot back, which guarantees prison time for everyone here and complete destruction of the company's value. At least if we cooperate, we have a chance at negotiating limited liability. Marcus stood up slowly. Absolutely not. We're not confessing to crimes based on speculation and paranoia from someone who's been a board member for 72 hours. This company has been operating legally. The company has been committing systematic fraud. Elena's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. You all know it. Some of you participated in it. Victor's arrest wasn't an aberration. It was a symptom of a culture that prioritized profits over ethics at every turn. And now we have a choice. Change that culture or watch it destroy us. James Park held up his hands. Let's all take a breath. Elena, these are serious allegations. Before we make any decisions, I think we need to have our technical team verify. The technical team reports to people in this room, Elena interrupted, some of whom might be Architect. We can't trust internal review. This has to be external, independent, and transparent. On whose authority? Marcus demanded. You don't get to unilaterally decide company policy, Elena. You're one board member with one vote. Then let's vote, Elena said. I move that we immediately engage an independent forensic analysis of all Hale Analytics software and that we commit to full cooperation with federal investigators regarding any findings. All in favor? She raised her hand. The room was still. Slowly, Margaret Chen raised her hand. If what Elena is saying is true, we have a legal obligation to disclose. I vote yes. David Richardson followed. Agreed. This is too serious to ignore. Catherine Park hesitated, then raised her hand. As general counsel, I have to advise that covering up known criminal activity makes us all liable. Yes. Sarah Kim, who'd been silent in the corner, raised her hand. I can verify Elena's technical findings. The backdoors exist. Yes. 5 votes. A majority. The other 6 board members sat with their hands down, expressions ranging from furious to calculating. Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This meeting is over. I'm calling an emergency shareholder vote to remove Elena from the board for gross mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. Anyone who wants to join me, my lawyers will be in touch. He walked out, followed by the admiral and 2 others. That left 7 board members in the room, split right down the middle on what to do next. James Park looked exhausted. Elena, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you've just made powerful enemies. Marcus has enough shares and relationships to make your life very difficult. I know, but I couldn't stay silent. No, James agreed. I suppose you couldn't. That's probably why you're going to change things here. if you survive long enough. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. Margaret pulled Elena aside. You need protection, not legal protection, physical protection. Marcus doesn't make threats he doesn't follow through on, and you just humiliated him in front of the entire board. You think he'd actually hurt me? Margaret's expression was grim. I think he's capable of anything when his interests are threatened, and you just threatened decades of carefully constructed arrangements. Be careful, Elena, please. Elena left the building feeling like she'd just stepped into a minefield. Her phone was blowing up with messages, reporters wanting comments, lawyers demanding conferences, unknown numbers that she was learning to ignore. One message stood out. From Victor. I heard what you did at the board meeting. You're right about the back doors. I found them a year ago. That's why I started moving money offshore. I was trying to escape before it all came out. We need to talk. Please. Elena stared at the message. Victor wanted to talk. The man who'd abandoned her, stolen her work, and tried to take her children. He wanted to help now? She should delete the message, ignore him, let him rot in federal detention while his empire collapsed. But Victor knew things. He'd been inside the operation for years. If she wanted to understand who Architect really was and how deep the corruption went, he might be her best source. Against every instinct, she texted back, when and where. The response came immediately. Tomorrow, Federal Detention Center visiting hours. Come alone. Trust no one else, Elena. Not even your father. Especially not your father. She was still staring at the message when a black SUV pulled up beside her on the street. The window rolled down and Agent Mitchell smiled at her from the driver's seat. Mrs. Ward, I think we need to have that conversation now. Get in. Elena looked at the FBI agent, at her phone with Victor's cryptic warning, at the Hale Analytics building behind her where her father was probably already plotting revenge. Every choice led deeper into danger. Every path forward required trusting someone who might betray her. There was no safe option left. She thought about Maya and Lucas, waiting at home with Mrs. Chen. They deserved better than this. Better than a mother who was about to be swallowed by federal investigations and corporate warfare. But they also deserved to grow up knowing their mother had fought for what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Elena got in the SUV. Agent Mitchell drove for several blocks in silence before speaking. You did the right thing today, trying to force disclosure at the board meeting. How do you know about that? It was 20 minutes ago. We have sources inside Hale Analytics, have had them for months. That's how we knew Victor was moving money offshore. That's how we knew about the back doors. What we don't know is who Architect is or how high this conspiracy goes. And you think I can help you figure that out? I think you're the only person who might be able to, Mitchell said. You're not part of the old guard. You're not compromised by years of looking the other way. And you're smart enough to see the patterns. She pulled the SUV into an underground parking garage, then killed the engine. I'm going to be honest with you, Elena. This investigation is bigger than Hale Analytics. We're looking at a network of tech companies, government officials, and intelligence contractors who've been using backdoor access to conduct illegal surveillance, manipulate elections, and suppress dissent. Hale Analytics is just one piece, but it's a big piece. If we can flip someone high enough in the organization, we can bring down the entire network. And you want that someone to be me. I want that someone to be whoever's willing to tell the truth, Mitchell corrected. Right now, that seems to be you. But I need to know, are you willing to testify? Are you willing to wear a wire to board meetings? Are you willing to help us build a case against your father if he's involved? Elena thought about Marcus, about his cold calculation and his admission that he'd been manipulating her life for years. He'd never been a father in any real sense, just a man who saw her as an investment that hadn't paid off the way he'd wanted. If my father is part of this, Elena said slowly, if he's Architect or if he knew about Architect and did nothing, then yes. I'll help you build a case against him. But I need something in return. What? Full immunity for me and protection for my children. If this goes as deep as you say, the people involved won't hesitate to threaten my kids. I need a guarantee they'll be safe. Mitchell nodded. I can make that happen. But there's something else you should know. The grand jury hearing on Monday? That's a formality. We already have enough to indict multiple board members. The question is how many and how far up we can go. With your cooperation, we can potentially reach all the way to the top of this conspiracy. Without it, we get the small fish and the big ones swim away. Who are the big fish? That's what we need you to help us discover, Mitchell said. But based on what we've seen so far, this involves people in the Defense Department, the intelligence community, and possibly elected officials. The backdoors in Hale Analytics software have been used to conduct warrantless surveillance on American citizens, suppress political opposition in allied countries, and manipulate data for corporate gain. Whoever ordered this, whoever built this system, they're not going to go down without a fight. Elena felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. She'd wanted to reclaim her algorithm and protect her children. She'd ended up in the middle of a conspiracy that could topple governments. I need to think about this, she said. Talk to my lawyers. Figure out what I'm really agreeing to. You have until Monday morning, Mitchell said. After that, the grand jury proceedings start and your options narrow considerably. Choose wisely, Elena. This is probably the most important decision you'll ever make. She drove Elena back to Queens and led her out a block from her apartment. Elena walked the rest of the way in a daze, her mind trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a few hours. When she got home, Mrs. Chen met her at the door with a worried expression. There were men here asking about you. Said they were journalists, but they didn't feel like journalists. I told them you weren't here and I didn't know when you'd be back. Elena's blood ran cold. What did they look like? Professional, suits. One of them kept looking at the twins through the window. I didn't like it. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Elena didn't know what to say. How do you explain to your elderly neighbor that you might have just put her in danger by association? She checked on the twins. They were fine, playing with blocks, but Elena couldn't shake the image of strange men watching them through the window. This had to end. She couldn't live like this, constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering who was watching, who was threatening, who was going to make the next move. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. The men who came to your apartment work for your father. He wants his property back. The twins. He's filing for emergency custody on grounds that you're an unfit mother who's put the children in danger through your reckless actions. Court hearing is Friday. Thought you should know. A friend. Elena's hands started shaking. Her father was coming for her children. The one thing she'd fought for, the one thing that mattered more than the company or the money or any of it, Marcus was trying to take them away. She called Rebecca, then Michael, then Agent Mitchell. Within an hour, her apartment was full of lawyers and federal agents, all talking about protective orders and custody laws and evidentiary standards. But Elena barely heard them. She was thinking about the choice in front of her. She could cooperate with the FBI, expose everything, and risk losing the custody fight while the legal chaos played out. Or she could back down, take her father's inevitable deal, and save her children at the cost of everything else. It wasn't really a choice at all. I need to see Victor tomorrow, she told Agent Mitchell. Alone. He knows things about my father that might help us. I don't care if it's not standard procedure, Elena interrupted. Victor sent me a message warning me about my father. If there's a chance he can give me leverage, I have to try. Can you arrange it or not? Mitchell exchanged glances with her partner, then nodded slowly. I can arrange it. But this could be a trap, Elena. Victor might be working with your father, trying to get you to say something incriminating. Everything is a trap at this point, Elena said tiredly. I just have to figure out which trap is survivable. That night, after everyone had left and the twins were finally asleep, Elena sat alone in her dark apartment and allowed herself to cry. Not from fear or despair, but from sheer overwhelming exhaustion. She'd fought so hard for so long, and the finish line kept moving further away. She thought about the woman she'd been 7 years ago, walking down the aisle toward Victor, convinced she'd found love and partnership and a future worth building. That woman had been so naive, so trusting, so certain that good intentions and hard work would be enough. That woman was gone. What remained was someone harder, sharper, more capable of the brutal calculations necessary to survive, but also more alone than Elena had ever imagined possible. Her phone lit up with one final message before she forced herself to sleep. Tomorrow changes everything. Be ready. The real game is about to start. She had no idea who sent it or what it meant, but she knew with absolute certainty that they were right. Tomorrow would change everything. The question was whether she'd survive it. The federal detention center smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Elena sat in a small visiting room with reinforced glass and cameras in every corner, waiting for them to bring Victor in. Agent Mitchell had arranged this meeting, but made it clear she'd be watching and recording everything. There would be no privacy, no off-the-record confessions. Just two people who'd once promised to love each other forever, now meeting as strangers across a table bolted to the floor. Victor looked different. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that made him look ordinary, diminished. The confident swagger he'd carried like armor had cracked, revealing something more human underneath: fear, exhaustion, and what might have been regret. He sat down slowly, studying Elena's face as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the quiet wife he'd discarded. "You look different," he said finally. "So do you." A ghost of his old smile flickered across his face. "Yeah, well, federal detention isn't exactly a spa. How are the twins?" "They're fine. They ask about you sometimes. I don't know what to tell them." "Tell them their father made mistakes," Victor said quietly. "Big ones. Tell them I'm sorry." Elena hadn't expected that. She'd steeled herself for manipulation, for Victor trying to work an angle. Actual remorse threw her off balance. "Your message said I should trust no one, especially not my father. Why?" Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping even though they both knew everything was being recorded. "Because Marcus is architect. He's the one who built the backdoor system into Hale Analytics from the beginning. I didn't know about it until a year ago, and when I found out, he told me I had two choices: play along or have an accident. I chose to play along and start moving money offshore so I could eventually disappear. But I wasn't fast enough." Elena's breath caught. "You're saying my father framed you? That the FBI arrest was his doing?" "Not framed exactly. I did commit the crimes I'm charged with. But Marcus made sure the evidence reached the right people at the right time. He needed me out of the way because I was becoming a liability. I knew too much and wasn't controllable anymore. He's been planning to replace me with someone he could fully control." Victor's eyes met hers. "He was planning to replace me with you." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Her father's sudden reappearance in her life, the board seat, the pressure to accept his alliance, the custody threat when she refused. It had all been orchestrated from the beginning. "But I refused his deal," Elena said. "I exposed the back doors at the board meeting." "Which means you're now a threat instead of an asset," Victor said. "Elena, Marcus doesn't forgive threats. He eliminates them. The custody filing is just the opening move. He's going to come at you from every angle until you either submit or are destroyed. Then I'll destroy him first." Victor laughed bitterly. "With what? He's been building his network for 50 years. Defense contractors, intelligence officials, senators, judges. Half the power structure in this city owes him favors. You've been a serious player for what? A week? You're outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outmatched. Then why are you telling me this? If he's so powerful, why risk warning me?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "Because I loved you once. Really loved you, before I let ambition and fear corrupt everything. And because the twins deserve better than to be pawns in Marcus's games. They deserve a mother who fights for them, even if their father turned out to be worthless." "You're not worthless," Elena said, surprising herself. "You're just weak. There's a difference." "Is there?" Victor smiled sadly. "Either way, I can't help you fight Marcus directly, but I can give you something he doesn't know I have." He pulled out a small USB drive from his pocket, sliding it across the table. "This contains every communication Marcus sent as architect. Every order, every decision, every conspiracy. I've been keeping insurance for the past year, documenting everything. It's encrypted, but the password is the twins' birthday plus the year we got married." Elena stared at the drive like it might explode. "Why didn't you give this to the FBI?" "Because then Marcus would know I betrayed him, and he'd make sure I never saw daylight again. Inmates have accidents in federal detention all the time. But if you give it to them, I have plausible deniability. I can claim you must have found it in my office or hacked my accounts. Marcus won't be certain I turned on him, which means I might survive this." "You're still protecting yourself." Always, Victor admitted. I haven't changed that much. But at least this time my self-interest aligns with doing something decent. Take the drive, Elena. Use it. Burn Marcus to the ground before he buries you. A guard knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Mrs. Ward. Elena picked up the drive, feeling its weight, not physical weight, but the weight of what it represented. Evidence that could destroy her father. Evidence that could also make her a target for everyone in his network. There's something else you should know, Victor said as the guard's footsteps faded. The custody filing isn't just about controlling you. Marcus is claiming that the twins aren't mine. He's demanding DNA testing, and he's going to use that to argue that you committed fraud during our marriage, that you tricked me into raising another man's children. Elena's blood turned to ice. That's insane. The twins are yours. I know they are. But Marcus is going to produce a fake paternity test saying otherwise. He has doctors and labs on his payroll. Once doubt is introduced, the court will order its own testing, which will prove the twins are mine, but by then the damage to your credibility will be done. Every judge will question whether you're truthful about anything. How do you know this? Because he used the same tactic against a business partner 10 years ago, destroyed the guy's reputation with fake evidence, then apologized when the truth came out. By then it didn't matter. The partner's career was finished. Marcus plays a long game, Elena. He's setting up dominoes now that won't fall for months. But when they do, they'll crush you. The guard returned. Time's up. Elena stood, clutching the USB drive. Victor, if you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate setup, then I'm a better actor than I think I am, Victor said. Look, I know I don't deserve your trust. I know I destroyed what we had. But for what it's worth, I am sorry. I hope you find a way to beat him. Someone needs to. The guard led him away, and Elena was left alone in the visiting room with a USB drive that could either save her or condemn her. She had no way to know which without opening it, and opening it meant trusting that Victor was telling the truth. She called Agent Mitchell from the detention center lobby. I have something you need to see, but I want to make a deal first. They met at a secure FBI office in Manhattan, a bland room with no windows and recording equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Mitchell sat across from Elena, with her partner and 2 other agents Elena didn't recognize. What kind of deal? Mitchell asked. Full immunity for me, protective custody for my children, and witness protection if necessary after this is over. In exchange, I'll give you everything. The USB drive from Victor, my testimony about my father's role in Hale Analytics, cooperation with any investigation you want to pursue. But I need guarantees in writing before I hand anything over. One of the new agents spoke up. Mrs. Ward, we don't typically negotiate immunity deals until we know what information we're getting. Then I walk out of here right now and you never find out what's on this drive, Elena said calmly. She was done being intimidated, done being pushed around by people who held power over her. I know what I have is valuable. You know it too, or you wouldn't have brought 4 agents to this meeting. So let's stop playing games and negotiate like adults. Mitchell smiled slightly. You've changed since the custody hearing. I've learned from the best criminals and lawyers in New York, Elena said. It's been educational. They negotiated for 2 hours. Elena's lawyers, Rebecca and Michael, who'd arrived within 20 minutes of her call, fought for every clause, every protection, every guarantee. By the time they finished, Elena had a signed immunity agreement covering everything except murder, protective detail for Maya and Lucas starting immediately, and a commitment from the FBI to expedite the custody case in her favor using evidence of Marcus's criminal activities. Only then did she hand over the USB drive. The encryption took Mitchell's tech team 15 minutes to crack. What they found made the lead agent actually whistle in appreciation. This is incredible, he said, scrolling through files. Communications going back 6 years. Marcus Whitmore isn't just architect. He's been running this operation from the start. He recruited the board members, set up the shell companies, coordinated with government officials. This is RICO territory. We can bring down the entire network. How long until you can arrest him? Elena asked. We'll need to verify the evidence, cross-reference with what we already have, build an airtight case. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I don't have 3 weeks. The custody hearing is Friday. That's 2 days. Mitchell exchanged glances with her partner. We can expedite, but there are legal procedures. Then bend them. Elena said flatly. Marcus is going to use that hearing to destroy my credibility and take my children. If you want my cooperation beyond this USB drive, if you want me to testify at trials and help you understand the technical details, then you keep my children safe. Starting Friday. The agents huddled, speaking in low voices. Finally, Mitchell nodded. We can have him picked up Thursday night on material witness grounds. Hold him for questioning through the weekend. That'll buy you time to deal with the custody hearing without him interfering. But Elena, you need to understand, once we move on Marcus, this escalates. His network will know we're coming for them. Some of them will flee, others will start destroying evidence, and a few might decide to eliminate witnesses before they can testify. Meaning me. Meaning you. Are you sure you want to do this? Elena thought about her children, sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their grandfather was a monster. She thought about all the people hurt by the surveillance systems built on her algorithm. She thought about the woman she'd been 7 years ago and the woman she'd become. I'm sure. Thursday night, Elena sat in her apartment with 2 FBI agents in the living room and Rebecca going over her custody hearing strategy. Maya and Lucas were confused about the nice police officers staying with them, but accepted it with the resilience of children who'd learned that adult problems were beyond their understanding. At 11 p.m., Elena's phone rang. Marcus Whitmore. She put it on speaker so the agents could hear. Hello, Father. Elena, I hear you've been having meetings with federal agents. That's disappointing. I'd hoped we could resolve this family dispute privately. There's nothing private about systematic corruption and criminal conspiracy. Strong words from someone about to lose custody of her children, Marcus said, his voice cold. I've reviewed the evidence my lawyers have prepared for tomorrow's hearing. Your mental health history, your financial instability, your tendency to make wild accusations without proof. The judge is going to have serious concerns about your fitness as a parent. Funny you should mention evidence, Elena said. Because I've been reviewing some myself. Emails, financial records, encrypted communications. Very interesting reading. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed, no longer coldly confident, but calculating and dangerous. What do you want, Elena? I want you to withdraw the custody petition. I want you to resign from Hale Analytics Board immediately. And I want you to stay away from me and my children for the rest of your life. And in exchange? In exchange, I won't make certain documents public. Yet. Marcus laughed, but it sounded hollow. You're bluffing. If you had anything real, you'd have already used it. Am I bluffing? There's one way to find out. Show up to the custody hearing tomorrow and see what happens. Or withdraw the petition tonight and save us both the drama. You've made a mistake, Elena. A serious one. I've survived challenges from people far more dangerous than my naive daughter. Whatever you think you have on me, whatever game you think you're playing, you're outmatched. Withdraw your cooperation with the FBI by midnight, or the consequences will be severe. The consequences are already severe, Elena said. For you. Check your front door. She hung up. 30 seconds later, her phone lit up with news alerts. Marcus Whitmore arrested by FBI agents on suspicion of conspiracy, wire fraud, and unauthorized computer access. The story was already spreading across financial news sites, complete with photos of him being led out of his penthouse in handcuffs. One of the FBI agents in Elena's living room grinned. Your timing was perfect. We were waiting for you to finish the call before we moved in. Elena watched the news coverage, feeling nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just hollow exhaustion. This was her father being arrested, the man who'd raised her, however badly. And she'd helped put him in handcuffs. Rebecca touched her arm gently. You did the right thing. Did I? Or did I just become like him, willing to destroy anyone who gets in my way? There's a difference between self-defense and aggression, Rebecca said. Marcus was going to take your children and ruin your life. You stopped him using legal means and evidence. That's not the same as what he did. Elena wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe there was still a meaningful distinction between fighting for justice and fighting for power. But late at night, alone with her doubts, the line seemed increasingly blurred. The custody hearing Friday morning was anticlimactic. Marcus's lawyers tried to proceed without him, but without their primary witness, and with the news of his arrest dominating every screen in the courthouse, The judge quickly saw through the facade. "I'm dismissing this petition with prejudice," Judge Chen announced. "Mr. Whitmore's arrest on federal corruption charges calls into question every allegation he made about Mrs. Ward's fitness as a parent. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Whitmore or his representatives from contacting Mrs. Ward or her children pending resolution of his criminal case. Full custody remains with Mrs. Ward." It was over. Elena walked out of the courthouse with Maya and Lucas, past reporters shouting questions, and got into an FBI vehicle that took them to a safe house in Westchester. The agents explained it was temporary, just until they assessed the threat level from Marcus's associates, but Elena was grateful for the space to breathe. That weekend, she barely slept. The news was non-stop coverage of the Hale Analytics scandal. More arrests came. The retired admiral, 2 board members, 3 government officials who'd been taking bribes. Sarah Kim and the other former employees who'd helped Elena were interviewed as whistleblowers. The company's stock price cratered, wiping out billions in value. And in the middle of it all, Elena received a handwritten letter delivered by courier to the safe house. The envelope was expensive paper, the handwriting elegant and old-fashioned. "Dear Elena," it read, "congratulations on your victory. You played the game better than I anticipated. I underestimated you, which is perhaps the greatest mistake an old man can make, assuming the next generation will be weaker than his own. You've proven me wrong. The evidence you provided to federal prosecutors is thorough and damning. My lawyers tell me I'm likely facing significant prison time. That's acceptable. I'm 73 years old, I've had a good run, but I want you to understand something before I disappear into the federal system. Everything I did believing it was necessary. The surveillance networks, the backdoors, the compromises, they weren't about profit. They were about control, about making sure the world remained stable, predictable, safe. You've torn down that control in the name of ethics and transparency. Now we'll see what happens when nobody's watching the watchers anymore. I suspect you'll find that chaos isn't as liberating as you imagine. Your children are beautiful, by the way. I've been watching them grow through surveillance feeds from your building. Maya has my eyes. Lucas has your intelligence. They deserve better than to become pawns in anyone's game, including mine or yours. Take care of them, Elena. And when you're my age, looking back on the choices you made, I hope you'll understand that I tried to teach you the most important lesson. Power isn't about being good or evil. It's about being willing to make hard choices that others won't. You've learned that lesson whether you admit it or not. Goodbye, daughter. I'm proud of you, for whatever that's worth. Marcus. Elena read the letter 3 times, then burned it in the safe house fireplace while the FBI agents watched in confusion. She didn't want those words in the world, didn't want them in her children's future, didn't want to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that her father might be right about some things. Monday morning brought the grand jury proceedings. Elena testified for 6 hours, walking prosecutors through the technical details of the APNM algorithm, the backdoors, the conspiracy. Victor testified separately, and his cooperation, combined with Elena's evidence, was enough to secure indictments against 12 defendants, including Marcus. The Hale Analytics Board held an emergency meeting that evening. Elena attended remotely via video conference, still in the safe house. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked. James Park spoke first. "The company is in crisis. Half our contracts have been canceled. Our stock is worthless. We're facing lawsuits from clients, investors, and government agencies. The question before us is simple. Do we try to save this company, or do we vote to dissolve and liquidate assets?" Silence around the table. These were people who'd spent years building toward power and profit, and now they were discussing surrender. Elena unmuted herself. "I have a proposal. We don't save Hale Analytics, we let it die. But we use its assets to build something new, a company genuinely committed to ethical technology, transparent operations, and positive social impact. We take the APNM algorithm and deploy it exclusively for humanitarian purposes. Healthcare, environmental protection, disaster relief. We make it open source so anyone can verify there are no backdoors, and we create a new corporate structure with independent oversight to prevent what happened here from ever happening again." Margaret Chen leaned forward on her screen. "That's an idealistic vision, Elena, but it doesn't address the practical reality that we're all likely to be bankrupt from lawsuits before we can implement any of it. What if I told you I have commitments from 3 major foundations to fund the new venture? Elena said. I've spent the last week making calls. The Gates Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation have all expressed interest in supporting ethical AI development. Combined funding of $200 million to start, with more if we hit milestones. It's not enough to save Hale Analytics, but it's enough to build something better from the ruins. David Richardson's eyebrows rose. You've been negotiating with foundations while in FBI protective custody? I'm good at multitasking. That got a few exhausted laughs. The vote was unanimous. Hale Analytics would be dissolved in an orderly bankruptcy, with assets transferred to a new nonprofit entity called the Minerva Technology Initiative. Elena would serve as executive director, with a restructured board committed to transparency and accountability. It took 6 months to execute the plan. 6 months of legal proceedings, asset transfers, and painful restructuring. Victor pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received a 4-year sentence. He'd served 2 with good behavior. Brianna Cross turned state's evidence and walked away with probation, just as Marcus had predicted. Marcus himself refused to plead and was convicted at trial, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Elena attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the gallery with Rebecca. When the judge read the sentence, Marcus turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. He nodded once, acknowledgement, maybe respect, then was led away by marshals. Elena never saw him again. The Minerva Technology Initiative launched in early fall with a mission statement Elena had written herself. Technology should empower humanity, not control it. Algorithms should serve people, not manipulate them. Innovation should solve problems, not create them. The first project was a healthcare analytics system for underserved communities using APNM to predict disease outbreaks and optimize resource allocation. The second was an environmental monitoring network to track pollution and climate change in real time. The third was a disaster response platform that helped coordinate relief efforts in areas hit by natural disasters. None of it made anyone billionaires, but it helped people, real people, in measurable ways. And slowly, the narrative around Elena began to shift. She was no longer the discarded wife who got revenge. She was the technologist who'd reclaimed her work and redirected it toward genuine good. 1 year after the custody hearing, Elena stood on stage at a TED conference in Vancouver, explaining the Minerva Initiative to an audience of tech leaders and innovators. Maya and Lucas sat in the front row with Mrs. Chen, who'd become something like a grandmother to them. A year ago, Elena told the audience, I thought success meant destroying the people who'd hurt me. I thought justice meant watching my enemies suffer. But I learned something important. Revenge is empty. It doesn't heal wounds or build anything lasting. What heals is purpose. What lasts is the work you do and the lives you improve. My father taught me that power is about making hard choices. He was right about that. But he was wrong about what those choices should be. Power isn't about controlling others. It's about empowering them. It's not about surveillance and manipulation. It's about transparency and trust. It's not about building empires that last forever. It's about building systems that make empires unnecessary. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, reporters crowded around asking about her father, about Victor, about the scandal. Elena answered politely but briefly, then escaped to a quiet hallway where Rebecca was waiting. You did great, Rebecca said. Very inspiring. I feel like a fraud, Elena admitted, standing up there talking about empowerment and ethics when I destroyed dozens of lives to get here. You destroyed people who were actively harming others, Rebecca corrected. There's a difference. Not everyone you hurt was innocent, Elena. Most of them chose their path knowing the consequences. Did they? Or were they just products of a system that rewarded corruption and punished ethics? How many Marcus Whitmores are out there right now teaching their children that power justifies everything? How many victors are convincing themselves that a little fraud is acceptable if it builds something impressive? We didn't fix the system. We just removed a few bad actors. Rome wasn't built in a day, Rebecca said, and it wasn't torn down in one either. You're doing important work. It matters. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Elena nodded, wanting to believe it. Wanting to believe that the choices she'd made, the people she'd betrayed, the lives she'd ruined, had been worth it for the greater good. That night, back in her new apartment in Brooklyn, modest but comfortable, with separate bedrooms for the twins and an office where Elena could work, she tucked Maya and Lucas into bed. "Mommy, are you famous now?" Maya asked, her eyes wide. "Not famous, just busy trying to help people." "Like a superhero?" Elena smiled. "More like an engineer who learned some hard lessons." "What lessons?" Lucas asked, always the more curious one. "That people are complicated, that doing the right thing isn't always clear, that you can't control everything, so you have to focus on controlling what matters most." "What matters most?" Maya pressed. Elena kissed her daughter's forehead. "You too. Always you too. Everything else is just details." After the twins were asleep, Elena sat in her office looking at a photograph on her desk. It was from her wedding day. Her and Victor, young and hopeful, convinced they were building something that would last forever. She kept the photo not as a reminder of what she'd lost, but as a reminder of what she'd learned. Love wasn't enough. Good intentions weren't enough. Even brilliance and hard work weren't enough. What mattered was choosing every day to do the difficult work of being ethical in an unethical world, of being honest in a culture of deception, of building systems that empowered rather than controlled. Her phone buzzed. Email from Sarah Kim. "Quarterly results are in. Healthcare system deployed in rural Uganda has reduced infant mortality by 18%. Environmental monitoring caught illegal dumping that would have poisoned water supply for 40,000 people. Disaster response platform coordinated relief for earthquake victims in Peru. We're making a difference, Elena. Real, measurable difference. Thank you for not giving up." Elena read the email 3 times, letting the words sink in. 18% reduction in infant mortality. That meant real babies who would grow up who might have died. Real lives saved because she'd fought back, because she'd refused to stay quiet, because she'd been willing to destroy everything to rebuild it better. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. She opened her laptop and started writing a proposal for the next project. An algorithmic bias detection system that would help identify and correct discriminatory patterns in AI systems before they caused harm. It was ambitious, technically challenging, and absolutely necessary. The work would never be finished. There would always be another Marcus Whitmore, another corrupt system, another choice between what was easy and what was right. But Elena had learned that she was capable of making those choices. Not perfectly, not without cost, but consistently and with conviction. 2 years after the custody hearing, Victor was released early for good behavior. Elena agreed to supervise visitation with the twins on the condition that he attended therapy and stayed away from tech entrepreneurship. He agreed, got a job teaching business ethics at a community college, and slowly rebuilt a relationship with Maya and Lucas. "Ironic, isn't it?" he said to Elena during one of their awkward custody exchanges. "Me teaching ethics." "Maybe you're qualified," Elena said. "You've seen what happens when you ignore them." "I suppose that's one way to look at it." Victor hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you built. The Minerva Initiative. It's what we should have done from the start." "We weren't ready for it from the start," Elena said. "We had to fail first. Learn the hard way. Maybe that's the only way anyone really learns." Victor nodded slowly. "Maybe. Take care of yourself, Elena. And thank you for letting me see the kids. I know I don't deserve it." "Nobody deserves anything," Elena said. "We just get chances. What we do with them is up to us." 3 years after the custody hearing, Marcus Whitmore died in federal prison. Heart attack, the officials said. He was 76 years old. Elena didn't attend the funeral. She sent flowers with a card that read simply, "You taught me to be strong. I'm sorry you never learned to be good. Rest in peace." She didn't know if she meant it. Didn't know if she'd forgiven him or if forgiveness was even the point. He'd been a monster, but he'd also been her father. Those two truths coexisted, complicated and unresolved. 5 years after the custody hearing, Elena received an email from Victor. He'd been diagnosed with cancer, treatable, but serious. He wanted to make sure his will was in order, that the twins would be provided for, that Elena knew he appreciated everything she'd done. "I'm not asking for sympathy," he wrote. "I know I squandered my chances at redemption, But I want you to know that watching you succeed where I failed has been the most educational experience of my life. You turned our shared catastrophe into something meaningful. That takes a kind of courage I never had. Thank you for showing me what that looks like, even if I was too broken to emulate it. Give the twins my love. Tell them their father tried, in the end, to be better, even if he didn't quite make it. Elena read the email to Maya and Lucas, who were now 8 years old, thoughtful, kind children who asked hard questions and demanded honest answers. They cried for their father, and Elena held them, and tried to explain that people were complicated, that loving someone didn't mean excusing them, that you could grieve for who someone might have been while accepting who they actually were. Will we turn out like Daddy? Lucas asked, his face wet with tears. Or Grandpa? Will we do bad things when we grow up? Everyone does bad things sometimes, Elena said carefully. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes. It's whether you'll learn from them and try to do better. Your father made huge mistakes, but he also gave you life and tried at the end to teach you something valuable. Your grandfather built terrible systems, but he also taught me to be strong enough to tear them down. You'll make your own choices. All I can do is love you and teach you to think carefully about the impact of those choices. What if we make the wrong choice? Maya asked. Then you make a different choice next time, Elena said. That's all any of us can do. Learn, adjust, try again. 10 years after the custody hearing, Elena sat in a conference room at the United Nations, presenting the Minerva Initiative's 10th anniversary report. The organization had grown beyond her wildest expectations. Offices in 30 countries, partnerships with governments and NGOs worldwide, systems deployed that helped billions of people access healthcare, education, clean water, and disaster relief. The APNM algorithm, once weaponized for surveillance and control, was now saving lives. Elena's work, her actual original work, not Victor's corrupted version, was making the world measurably better. During the Q&A session, a young woman in the audience raised her hand. Ms. Ward, you've been very open about the ethical failures that led to Hale Analytics' collapse. Do you think the tech industry has learned those lessons? Or are we still building systems that prioritize profit over people? Elena considered the question carefully. Honestly, both. We're making progress. More companies are thinking about algorithmic bias, data privacy, social impact, but the fundamental incentive structure hasn't changed. Companies still get rewarded for growth and punished for restraint. Until we change that, until we make ethics as profitable as exploitation, we'll keep seeing new versions of the same old problems. What I hope the Minerva Initiative demonstrates is that it's possible to build sustainable organizations that prioritize impact over profit. It's harder, slower, less glamorous, but it's possible, and it's necessary. The standing ovation that followed felt different from the TED Talk years earlier. This time, Elena didn't feel like a fraud. She'd earned this applause through a decade of hard work, difficult choices, and constant struggle to live up to the principles she'd claimed. That night, she flew back to New York and went straight to her children's school concert. Maya, now 13, was playing violin. Lucas, also 13, was in the percussion section. They were confident, talented, kind kids who had no memory of the apartment in Queens, or the custody battle, or the federal investigations. Those were just stories their mother told sometimes, cautionary tales about the importance of ethics and integrity. After the concert, as they walked to the subway together, Lucas asked casually, "Mom, I've been reading about Grandpa. For a history project, was he really as bad as the articles say?" Elena had been dreading this question for years. Your grandfather was complicated. He believed the ends justified the means, that controlling people was the same as protecting them. He was brilliant and dangerous, and utterly convinced he was doing the right thing. In the end, he hurt a lot of people, including me. But he also taught me lessons I needed to learn. So yes, he was as bad as the articles say, and also more complex than any article can capture. Do you miss him? Sometimes. Not the person he actually was, but the person I wish he'd been. Does that make sense? Lucas nodded thoughtfully. Maya, who'd been listening quietly, added, "We learned in school that you can love someone and still recognize they did wrong things. That's what you mean, right?" "Exactly right," Elena said, pulling her children close. That's exactly right. 15 years after the custody hearing, Elena received an invitation to speak at MIT, her old university, where she'd started the research that became APNM. She brought Maya and Lucas, now 18 and about to start college themselves, to show them where their mother had once been young and idealistic and convinced she could change the world. "Did you?" Lucas asked, standing in the lab where Elena had developed her algorithm. "Change the world?" Elena looked around the familiar space, thinking about all the twists and turns her life had taken. The naive graduate student who'd trusted the wrong man. The broken wife who'd learned to fight back. The technologist who'd reclaimed her work and redirected it toward good. The mother who'd protected her children while trying to make the world safer for everyone's children. "I changed a small part of it," she said finally. "The world is still messy and complicated and full of people making terrible choices, but it's slightly better than it would have been if I'd stayed silent. That's all any of us can do, make our little corner slightly better and hope it spreads." "That's enough though, right?" Maya asked. "Making things slightly better?" Elena smiled. "It has to be. Because the alternative is despair. And I've learned that despair is a luxury we can't afford. There's too much work to do." 20 years after the custody hearing, Elena stood in her office at Minerva Initiative headquarters, a beautiful building in Brooklyn, designed by an architect committed to sustainable materials and community integration. On her wall was the patent for the APNM algorithm, framed next to photographs of systems deployed around the world, saving lives and empowering communities. Her children were grown now, pursuing their own paths. Maya was in medical school, planning to work in global health. Lucas was studying environmental science, focused on climate change mitigation. They'd turned out well, thoughtful, ethical, committed to making positive impacts. Elena couldn't take all the credit, but she liked to think she'd pointed them in the right direction. Victor had passed away 3 years earlier, his cancer returning more aggressively. He'd spent his final days writing letters to Maya and Lucas, trying to explain himself, to apologize, to offer whatever wisdom he could from a wasted life. Elena had kept the letters for her children to read when they were ready. That morning, she received an email from an unexpected source, Brianna Cross. She changed her name, moved to Oregon, started a nonprofit focused on helping women escape abusive relationships. Her email was brief. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I wanted you to know that what you did, standing up, fighting back, refusing to be erased, it inspired me to finally leave the life I was living. I was just as trapped as you were, in different ways. Thank you for showing me it was possible to escape. I hope you're well." Elena read the email twice, then wrote back, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad you found your way out. We all deserve second chances. Take care." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement that people were complicated, that victims and villains weren't always clear categories, that everyone was fighting their own battles. That afternoon, Elena met with her board of directors to discuss the next phase of Minerva Initiative's work. They were expanding into educational technology, building algorithmic systems that adapted to individual learning styles without exploiting student data or reinforcing existing inequalities. "It's ambitious," one board member cautioned. "Education technology has a terrible track record of good intentions turning into surveillance capitalism." "That's why we build it differently from the start," Elena said. "Open source code, transparent algorithms, independent oversight. We prove it's possible to create powerful technology without sacrificing ethics. That's always been our mission." The vote was unanimous to proceed. As the sun set over Brooklyn, Elena walked home through streets she'd lived in for 2 decades. This neighborhood had watched her transformation from broken wife to activist mother to respected technologist. She'd built a life here, raised her children here, learned who she really was here. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Another tech scandal. A major AI company caught using biased algorithms that discriminated against minorities in hiring decisions. The pattern was depressingly familiar, but Elena didn't despair. She opened her laptop and started drafting a proposal for a new Minerva Initiative project, an algorithmic auditing service that companies could use to identify and correct bias before it caused harm. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would help. And helping was enough. That night, she video called both her children. Maya was exhausted from medical school rotations. Lucas was excited about a research project on coral reef restoration. They talked about their lives, their challenges, their dreams. "Mom," Lucas said toward the end of the call, "I've been thinking about the story you told us, about how you fought back against Dad and Grandpa and the whole corrupt system. Do you ever regret it? Wish you'd just taken the settlement and walked away?" Elena thought about the question carefully. She thought about all the pain, the fear, the sleepless nights. She thought about the relationships destroyed, the trust broken, the years of struggle. She thought about her father dying in prison, about Victor dying too soon, about all the collateral damage her choices had created, and she thought about the lives saved by Minerva Initiative's work. The communities empowered, the systems made more just, the children who would grow up in a world slightly better than the one she'd inherited. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. It was hard, harder than anything I'd imagined. But it was worth it, not because I destroyed my enemies or because I got revenge. Those things were just means to an end. It was worth it because I learned who I really was, because I taught you two that fighting for what's right matters, even when it's difficult, because I took something that was being used to hurt people and transformed it into something that helps people. That's worth all the pain. That has to be worth it." "We're proud of you, Mom," Maya said softly. "We wanted you to know that." After the call ended, Elena sat in her quiet apartment, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline. Somewhere in this city, there were people plotting the next great scheme, the next exploitation dressed up as innovation. There were Marcus Whitmores in training, learning that power justified any compromise. There were victors convincing themselves that a little fraud was acceptable in service of something bigger. But there were also people like Sarah Kim and Amara Johnson, fighting for ethics within broken systems. People like Rebecca Choi and Michael Torres, using legal tools to hold power accountable. People like her own children, choosing to dedicate their lives to service rather than profit. The battle wasn't over. It would never be over. But Elena had learned that the battle itself was the point. Not winning forever, but fighting continuously for a world that valued humanity over efficiency, ethics over profit, people over power. She opened her journal, a practice she'd maintained for 20 years now, and wrote, "Day 7,305 since the custody hearing. The twins are grown, the company is thriving, the work continues. I am tired but not defeated, hopeful but not naive. I've learned that you can't fix everything, but you have to try to fix something. That revenge is empty, but justice is essential. That power corrupts, but powerlessness corrupts absolutely. That the only way to change systems is to break them and rebuild them with intention and care. I don't know if I'm a good person. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, made choices that haunt me, but I've also saved lives, empowered communities, and built systems that make the world measurably better. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for, to leave things slightly better than we found them. The poor wife is long gone. The victim is buried. What remains is someone who learned to fight, to build, to persist. A mother, a technologist, a woman who refused to be erased. That's enough. That has to be enough." She closed the journal and went to bed, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The empire was reclaimed, the enemies were defeated, and the future was secure. Not perfect, never perfect, but genuinely, honestly better. And in the end, better was all that mattered.